Ah, friends, listen to that music. That's how you know that not only are we back, but also we are back in the midst of a final dungeon in a Tales game. Welcome back to Tales of Praxis. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of withatterriblefate.com, your online source for all the most in-depth, rigorous analyses and celebrations of the storytelling of our favorite medium, video games. Here we are, wrapping up the latest stream in our Tales of Praxis series, which looks specifically at the storytelling language of Bandai Namco's Tales JRPGs. Through all of them, the streaming adventures have been from Symphonia to Dawn of the New World to Zestiria, now to Berseria, a wonderful little duology of duologies, if you like. I've also worked through some of the games off-stream, published companion analytical articles in withatterriblefate.com. I encourage you to check out. I will add at the top of the stream that, we're not going to put the cart before the horse in terms of already looking too far ahead before we finish Berseria. It is an open question right now, what we'll be playing next. So if you're interested in voting in what will be next, I'm going to pepper the stream more than once, if I can remember, with the link to the poll, because the poll is, I would say, minimally helpful right now because we have a three-way tie. So we'll see how it goes. We still have some time to decide because I'm hoping we'll wrap up the main story this evening, but then there's plenty of fun side content that I expect will take us through most of this coming week. And that'll be a nice way, I think, to digest and process the game after we've been through the conclusion of its main story. But man, what a nice place to be at now. We know the stakes. We're at that sweet spot in the JRPG narrative where the villain has shown his hand in terms of what it is he's trying to achieve, the change he wants for the world. The party has resolved more than one time over what it is that they want to do, the change that they want to bring to the world as they overcome the antagonist. And now really all that remains is that final action of those two perspectives coming into conflict and seeing what comes from that and what resolution comes from that. One of the most fun parts. I'm sure we're going to have plenty of conversation, an opportunity to discuss afterwards. Pottery, pleasure to have you. Happy Friday, my friend. Grail, you know we're back. I had to take a few minutes just to brace myself for the epic conclusion of this particular adventure, but we're back a few minutes late. Chrissy, hey, welcome. Nice to see you again. It's a pleasure to have you back on the stream. You're redacting even the name of the game that we should choose, Grail. I can't tell if that's a joke or just you being extra super fucking conscious about spoilers. Either way, so much the better. Thank you, Grail. Amazing. I think I really appreciate that. I would say let's use that, and I'll do some homework over the weekend, and we can dig into that either on Monday or if we end up having time tonight, whatever makes sense. Because I think when we have this music playing and we're already literally in the belly of the beast, as per the name of the stream, in the digestive embodied center of Innominat, we have to see things through for sure. But then we'll be on to the side quests after that. I started with this epic music because we did really pause in the middle of this dungeon, so I didn't want to foreground this wonderful Friday night stream with too many thoughts. Besides reminding people about the poll, I just wanted to say continuing to work on the article, which I'm really excited about. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for all of you. One of the things that's fun about what I'm doing now, working through Act 2 of Tales of Vesperia, and Pottery, you may appreciate this. Last year, when Dan and I lectured at PAX West 2022 about the Final Fantasy VII series, one of the things we said in the opening motions of that lecture is the series of Final Fantasy VII, if you're not familiar with it, has a reputation that precedes it in terms of the games being very complex in terms of the story, and not just complex, but also very confusing, hard to tell who's who, what's going on, how the different games relate to each other all the time. And so we raised the question as a way into thinking about the game's storytelling. Well, when you're going through a game and you find that you're confused about what's going on, it can help to ground you to ask the question, are the characters also confused about this? Because I think oftentimes, especially in modern days when we're consuming popular media, when we as consumers get confused, it's very easy to just draw what I would say is a bad inference, saying, oh, well, I'm confused, therefore this is a bad story. When oftentimes Yeah, it might be the case that sometimes the story is confusing because it's poorly constructed, but also confusion of the audience is a narrative device as much as anything. And so sometimes it might be part of the point that not only you, but also the characters are disoriented about what's happening in the world at some given point in the game's narrative. It's not that I'm working through something that's confusing about Tales of Vesperia right now, but in Act 2, I really found that I had to go back and reconstruct a lot of what happened in the earlier part of the act, because as you go through that game, even when you've played it more than once, it feels tremendously chaotic because you're bouncing around from place to place, basically just with the directive to understand more about the party's place in the world. And at every place you see, various people pulling the strings, like Cumor, like Jaeger, like the hunting blades. And it turns out ultimately that they're all connected. But I think it's very important to the way the story unfolds that you have no idea how or why they're connected as you're going through it, and that adds to a very felt disorientation, not just on the part of you, the player, but also on the part of the party. So it's taken me a while to work through and articulate why I think that chaos is important to the themes that I'm studying. That's going to be a big part of the study. So there's a lot of meat on the bone for no matter what you're interested in looking at in terms of the Praxis of the series, or Vesperia, or Destiny. So excited to keep you all posted as we continue to work through that. Hoping to get it out within the next few weeks, but it's going to be a worthwhile beast no matter what comes out of it. But with that, my friends, excited to dive back into this wonderful adventure of ours. I'll catch up on messages real quick since we have a delightfully talkative chat, and then we will jump right back in. Oh no, Chrissy. Muse, I assume you're talking about? I'm so sorry. That's a huge bummer. Well, my heart goes out to you. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to see them again at some point in the near future. Grail, I feel like that's a downgrade if we're pushing you from Judith to Magilu. Although, I don't know. I've been singing Magilu's praises a lot, especially over the last few streams. I think if this replay has shored up anything for me in terms of my experiences with Berseria, it's my appreciation of Magilu, which I had the first time, but I think the more I reflect on her character, especially in terms of the legacy of the Mavens, the more I've come to appreciate her. So I don't think that's the worst comparison to draw either. Yeah, it's true. We try to have a special energy on Friday streams, so we'll hopefully get into that. I'm already feeling jazzed. So I mean, not only a Friday stream, but when we're wrapping up the main story of the game, like that's a special energy. So I'm down for that. Talkative but Grail, let's be honest. If we had to put together a theatrical show to entertain a bunch of sailors in a port town, we could probably think of something. So maybe Magilu in more ways than one. That's the best transition I have. Friends, welcome back to Tales of Praxis. It's going to be a great stream. Hopefully not just with grinding enemies, but we're in the middle of a final dungeon, so that comes with the territory. Not before we catch up on our expedition, of course, which, as we all know, is the bread and butter of Tales of Berseria. Yeah, it is. It's definitely a bold venture, Chrissy, to jump in not just to the conclusion of a Tales game, but also to the conclusion of a prequel to a Tales game, which I think you also didn't watch the stream of. But I'll be interested, especially given your experience with the earlier ones that we streamed, how many of the themes and conclusory elements resonate with you, even with being divorced from the finer beats of the plot. Fantastic landscape. Depicts a tower of rebirth and a castle in the sky. Speaking of sky castles, the pair symbolic of unity between heaven and earth. I love it.
Good luck out there.
Well, there you go. Hopefully that's one that I'll be able to find a fan translation of, Grail. Especially for all of the praises you have repeatedly sung of it. Do we have any other... Yes, we haven't gotten the special collectible from Quickie Peninsula.
Scout ship departing.
Yeah, Chrissy, so I guess without totally bringing us down too much of a rabbit hole, the one thing I would say to ground this is one thing that comes out of especially Zestiria is it plays a lot with sort of the distinctions between malevolence as an immoral concept and malevolence as manifested in the game world, specifically as a conflict between the beliefs of an individual and the actions that they effect in the world around them. And when those two things come into conflict, they become malevolent in a way that turns them into demons or hellions, but in a way that is not identical nor coextensive with the immorality of the agent. And so what's interesting about this party is they're foregrounded as being evil, they're villainized in a world that is hegemonically controlled by this abbey that is ruled by this shepherd who seems to be the savior type, but really the rule that is being enforced on the world is quite literally suppressive of the emotions that make us human. And what it turns out, and what we've been wrestling with in the third act of this game, is that when it comes to the evil of the party, it's much more about malevolence in terms of self-contradiction and reflecting on how those self-contradictions can actually contribute to and constitute, in some cases, our humanity, rather than contributing to anything that's immoral as such. That's Aaron's 90-second distillation of what I at least am holding on to as the nugget that we're tracking primarily in the story so far.
On to battle.
Grail, I was going to ask you, what is the quickie reference? I think that's one that I didn't get. Is it one of the games that hasn't been translated, or one of the spin-offs or something? I'm sure you would know. Yeah, of course, Chrissy, and obviously you know me. You have any more specific questions as we work through the last dungeon here, you just let me know. Happy to give you more context. Eternia! There you go. Well, that's one that's on the list and in the library, so we will certainly get to that one. And on the poll! So I'll remind you all, if you're interested in knowing about the origins of Quickie Island, you can vote for Eternia on the poll of any of the officially localized Tales games that we could play next.
This is the Rangetsu style.
So that's the Rangetsu style?
Now,
So then here to here is the Rangetsu style?
just what do you think my style is?
I feel like that post-battle conversation is a little outdated after the final confrontation between Rokuro and Shigure. And all of the party members now know what the Rangetsu style is and have deep, unyielding respect for it. Oh, a spell that farms a soul grail. Me likey that. But here's my real question. Does that spell allow me to take advantage of enemies when they're wide open?
I was just getting warmed up.
I yelled that at Evie earlier today. She did not appreciate it. You're wide open, not I was just getting warmed up. Oh, yeah, you've had an interesting time jump, Chrissy, apropos of Symphonia's world, I guess, because Symphonia was 2003, if memory serves. Berseria was 2016, so yes, big time jump. Basically, while there's a ton of continuity between the design language in the Tales games, the last handful that have come out since kind of 2015 onward are often considered to have a very different overall design philosophy and just flavor to the games that preceded them.
Better be ready.
What? Busy pursuing higher education and a doctorate? Excuses, excuses. That's unacceptable. We're just glad to have you back. I know I have an email response that I owe you too, Chrissy, while you're here, so that is on my list. Don't worry about it. I'm just shit for answering communiques in a timely manner. As I know you know. Great minds think alike, and lazy gamer academics act alike, I guess. Not that either of us is lazy. I think that's a perfectly okay way in which to conduct oneself. Oh, I also, while we're just grinding through enemies in Innominat's body, I suppose it makes sense to tell the stream, because I'm sure Dan wouldn't mind me telling everyone. So Dan, when not being my friend and colleague and an expert game analyst, is also in the midst of an engagement to a wonderful young woman. They're getting married this coming February, and I'm his best man. And we, as recently as yesterday, confirmed plans that the bachelor party is going to be Dan and Aaron far overdue adventures in Japan. So we're going to be going back. I don't have to tell any of you who know me well enough to be watching the stream that I could not be more excited about that. And I suppose I also don't have to tell you that it's going to be a ton, I'm sure, of fruitful experiences in terms of thinking about games as literature. Whenever we do things like that, even more local than Japan, we come back with a million new ideas and sorts of analyses and content that we want to put together. So stay tuned. I'm sure that will only spell plenty of new initiatives from With a Terrible Fate down the line. Yeah, it'll be a fun time, Grail, absolutely. He said one of the things he's interested in doing is the hot springs in Hokkaido is something that he's never done. And my response was, Dan, I've gotten you to play enough Tales games by now for you to know that I am very down for some hot springs.
Here I come.
Yeah, I hope that works out for you, Chrissy. Never a bad time to go to Japan. And I will, absolutely. I'll send him your best. As you know, he asks after you often, too. That's really interesting history, Grail, and thank you for summarizing the history of the dev team so well, because I know enough about Tales to know that there were different teams that worked on different games, but I don't think I ever saw like the interactions and merging and fracturing of the teams so well summarized, so that's actually very helpful for me too. When you say that games such as Berseria are more Destiny inspired though, like, can you help walk me through or give you an example of what you mean by that? Because I'm trying to think, I feel like maybe I can feel it intuitively in something like the dungeon layout, but if I had to say anything about what distinguishes these games from the earlier ones, it wouldn't have been my first inclination to say it feels like Destiny. Oh, I see. Sure. In terms of the different gameplay mechanics. But surely Team Destiny worked on Tales of Destiny, right? Granted, they're the team names, but still. Oh, I see. Interesting, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the different combat is definitely the most evident distinction, and I will be interested for all of the different avenues we've taken into the Tales series at this point to go back to Grace's, because for all you've said, and I have this memory of it, but it's just not fresh enough in my head. It really feels in some ways like a kind of middle ground or transitional period, at least in terms of combat between some of the eras of Tales games. So it'll be fun to think about it specifically in that light when we do get to it as part of Tales of Praxis. Grail, I think we've talked about Silent Hill before, and you know I appreciate you and think a lot of you, but respectfully, that is a very dumb hill on which to die, I think. I say that also, as I think you know, as someone who hasn't played all of the Silent Hill games, though I very much want to, but come on, how are you going to outdo 2? 2 is a classic in horror storytelling, period, irrespective of medium. That will be the funny cherry on the top of the Tales of Praxis adventure if, during the main story conclusion of Tales of Berseria, we end up not even just talking about different Tales games, but actually talking about Silent Hill instead of the game we're playing. Be very on brand. Damn, Grail, you make a compelling counter-argument. My claims are flaccid in the face of your brutally coherent logic.
Your style is really unique.
Just wait until I pull out the good stuff.
I will say, and I'm trying not to say too much about which games I may or may not want to play next, because I'd really be happy with any of them, and also I don't want to sway the group mind too much. But with what you say, Grail, about some of the games being more self-contained and some, being duologies or trilogies or various sorts of continuities, I feel like it would be kind of fun after 2 duologies to play something that was more self-contained. If for no other reason than especially in the context of Tales of Praxis, where we're putting them all into intertextual conversation with one another, I think it can be fun to look at games that don't have any clear continuity in terms of like world history or literally happening in different parts of the same fictional world, and seeing what they have to say that can relate them to each other. Like what I'm doing with Vesperia and Destiny right now. But Xillia followed by Xillia 2 would also be very fun. It's so nice when we get routed to parts of the dungeon that we literally can't interact with yet. I love that. That's my favorite. It's still on my list, Chrissy. Months later, an Eternal Sonata is still on my list. Just help me get through and publish on all of the Tales games, and then I'll turn to Eternal Sonata when I'm 35. I was debating whether it was worth going back to that save point. I'm just going to do a quick save. Grail, I know what you mean, but also, my god, be realistic, please. There are so many JRPGs, and so many of them, I would say, are not on my list. Although, I don't know, I say that, but then anytime someone on the stream talks to me about a JRPG I haven't heard, and says, hey, let me tell you about why this is so cool and you find it interesting, right away, I always find myself saying, yeah, that sounds really cool, let's put it on the list. That is the timeless identity of the gamer, though. An endless list and never enough time to play even a fraction of it. Yes, self-contained, Chrissy, but I meant self-contained in terms of games that are self-contained within the within the corpus of the Tales games. Oh, we actually unlocked one of these. Do we dare? I don't know what's waiting for us, so I'll tag up on the quick save. No, my general games list is even more overwhelmingly long. Especially between classic games that I've never gotten around to and new games that I'm interested in. Like, Lies of P, been hearing some pretty cool stuff about that. Seems like it'd be right up my alley, but I just, especially when I'm in the middle of this big project of Tales of Praxis, it is so hard for Aaron to justify pulling away any of his time to playing something else. It's all the opportunity cost, you know? But we'll figure out how to balance it. Grail, that is the one option that I will shut down. There is no world in which I'm going to play Zillia and then take a big break and then go to Zillia 2. That's just inappropriate. I love that you're doubling down on the bit of my name being Aaron Terrible Fate, Grail. It's not the best thing I've ever been called, but it's certainly not the worst thing. You know what I hate about that joke too, Grail? Part of me wants to laugh, and then part of me wants to actually take the time to play all of those games and do a big fat comparative study of all of them. And you would all read it! This will be my one counter for this stream where I roast Grail for still not having read my treatise on Tales of the Abyss. Which I'm going to have to supplement with an addendum. Which will be fun new content, but my god. The Abyss truly does smile upon you endlessly. Don't bait me, Chrissy. You know I'll do it. I might not survive it, but I'll do it. Wittgenstein and Monolith want to know my location. Help me. Well, I do feel like the normal difficulty, as much as it's not Grail's nutty challenge run, has been pretty manageable for the pacing of this stream because, for instance, you know, this optional challenge boss is clearly a challenge, but not something, knock on wood, that's insurmountable or just a joke of a fight. I like when those things are balanced. Oh, you still haven't beaten the final boss of this Grail. I was staring at your message like, which game is he even fucking talking about? Yeah, I mean, you get what you ask for with challenges like that. Let me know when you do. I hope you beat the final boss by the time we get through all the side content. Wait, Chrissy, was it a good face? Was it a bad face? I don't know how to feel about that comment. Yeah, and that's fair, Grail, but just don't wait too long, otherwise it'll become less relevant once we move on from the game. Yeah, but I mean, if he's a gamer, I mean, that's... I'm not going to toot my own horn, but I'll say one of the things that I strive to do with those kinds of works especially is give non-academics a way to appreciate what those sorts of ideas can do for their understanding and appreciation of the game, even if they don't have the academic background. So, I'm not trying to say your friend is wrong, but your friend is categorically and transparently wrong. Glad I could help. Didn't you miss me? Oh, the souls! Oh, but also everyone's dead. I absorbed that. That's bullshit. Ah, the Pikachu face. That's good. That face just means that your mind is apt to engage with new and rich ideas, mostly of the game narrative variety. Man, I gotta focus more on the timing of that spell absorber if I'm gonna make Magulu worth it. Grail, is this just an elemental mismatch? I feel like none of my attacks are actually dealing damage now. Try switching to element. Now, Grail, we've decided that you love Tales of Berseria now. It's your favorite Tales game, as we all know, and I won't hear anything to the contrary. I did forget that. Thank you so much. It says it's just resistant to wind. I don't feel like everything we've been trying is the wind attribute. Maybe I'm just crazy. I do appreciate being able to find out that its name is the Lawless Vessel, because I didn't clock that when we came into it. So many great names in this game for enemy types. Pottery, I'm almost tempted to add Berseria as an option to the poll and just spam that with votes just to get Grail's goat. Wouldn't you love that, Grail? Grail, wouldn't that be your favorite? I love how non-specific that is, Grail. The nature of the crime, unclear, but it is certain that Grail would commit a crime. Yeah, I mean, you'll probably remember, Chrissy, the way that I introduced Dawn of the New World, the sequel to Symphonia, was that I also really didn't like it as a kid. But I think, upon review, it is certainly the kind of game that goes out of its way to be different than Symphonia for reasons that are specifically in conversation with Symphonia. But that's all to say, absolutely it's jarring, but I think there's a method to the madness. It's one I'll be going back to as well, because Chrissy, I don't know how in the loop you've been on this, but there was also an announcement that there's going to be a DLC for the most recent Tales game, which was recent as of 2 years ago, Tales of Arise. But what they've been forecasting about the content seems, at least to me, to read as though it would be really interestingly read in conversation with Dawn of the New World. So I have a thought for something that I want to read a little bit more closely and publish on before we get that in November. I hope we have an efficient way to either get out of here or that a Turtles has found his way in here before the final boss, because I'm very concerned about having one life bottle left. Actually, even concerned for this fight. That might have been the last life bottle, actually. Oh, fuck us, lads. I should have considered that before going into this fight, I suppose. Grail, don't say that. I suppose there are warp points that were supposed to help us as they opened up along the way, but I really don't want to do that. Jesus. Alright, well, Eisen's gone. Can we give dead characters a blast gauge so they can be swapped out? Or is that not a thing? No, of course not. That would be too easy. Yeah, it's level 65, so has a little bit of an advantage on us, but I mean, it's not like we're doing no damage. He's almost done at this point. But if we encounter any of these other monolith Malik cages, probably worth not doing right now, especially now that we have no life bottles. Can she stand up? Thank you. Yeah, and that attack just one-shotted Rokurou at full health. It seems fair and balanced. Yeah, that's probably a fair point, Pottery. I think the last time I did that was maybe 15 hours ago. We're gonna get through this, though. I'm committed at this point. The last 231 hit points are always the hardest. Well, at least the ones who survived got a whole lot of experience. Kill me! Please! I don't know why the little expedition ping at the end of that is the funniest shit in the world to me, but it is.
Take a look at this.
Show us your determination.
Honestly, after that Grail, I feel like we could fight our way through any number of the Angel Malachim, but I say that, and then I'm sure you're right that they would trample us. Alright, go Laphicet. Laphicet really is the underdog MVP of these battles, gradually growing more powerful. True to his character in the story. A mysterious model crafted on the Quickie Peninsula, said to have the power to unite two different energies. Ooh, energy manipulating technology. I feel like I'm working on my Destiny Vesperia study right now. It's all connected, my friends. I will say Aaron's definitely a big shill for the PS5. I got it early because I'm a crazy person, but from the first game I played on it, which was the Demon Souls remaster, which I loved, onward, I think it's a beautiful system, and I'm a huge fan of it. Grail, I'm going to politely ask you to leave. You can come back into the stream once we start the next Tales game. That pottery, I would say, is a hot take. I have a lot of love for Demon Souls, so I would probably fight you on that. I also have a lot of love for Dark Souls 2, though, so I'm not going to be one of those people who tells you, how can you possibly say that when Dark Souls 2 is a thing? I would say probably, in my mind, I'm really concerned about the life of our party, but I'm going to save and make sure everyone's healed, and we're just going to hold our breath and plow through here. What I would probably say, gun to my head, and it's like asking me to rank Tales games in the sense that I have a hard time buying into that methodology in the first place, as you all know. But I would say, while I do truly love all the Souls games, the third one, while really well put together and touching and impactful to me for a lot of reasons, feels to me more like a synthesis of the rest of the series rather than something that stands on its own, which I don't think is like a condemnation of it, because I think that is the point of Dark Souls 3. But in terms of finding them memorable and resonant on their own terms, I would say if I had to call one the weakest, it would probably be that one for that reason. Escape from the whole dungeon? I feel like that would just waste so much time. I also don't know how much of a hot take liking 2 is these days, though, Pottery, because I feel like It's something that I and Dan have been saying for years, but I feel like in recent times, like more and more people have been finally coming around to it, which is fun to see. I think it's one that grows on you as you play it more, and then honestly as you get older too. Oh yeah, and see, I started with the original Dark Souls, so I think your point of entry to any series has such a huge influence on how you see it. Oh, so it looks like we want a bridge here to be able to get over to the Earth Pulse point that activates the Geo board. Oh, is it? Because these are crystals we destroy, right? Did I just totally forget to destroy this one? There we go. Well, I would say also pottery. I mean, Dan and I a few years ago, we did a lecture on the overall Dark Souls series, and actually just Miyazaki's work since Demon Souls. So Dark Souls, but also Bloodborne and Sekiro. Elden Ring hadn't come out at that point. But I think Dark Souls 2 is also one of those games where it's hard to appreciate unless you're playing and reading it in the context of the broader series. Because I really think part of what the game is about at the end of the day is just dealing with the reality of living in a world that is embittered and unfair in a way that the original Dark Souls isn't. And that's in terms of everything from the nature of the world to the themes to the gameplay itself. Like, one of the things people always say about the original Dark Souls that makes it so compelling is, yeah, it's really hard, but if you die in it, it's your fault. You understand why, and that's how you're able to learn and get better at the game over time. It's the whole ethos of get good, right? Dark Souls 2, not like that. Many times you die in the game, it is not your fault. You feel like you're glitching into attacks, and you don't understand enough about what killed you to be able to learn and adapt from it, which I think is part of what makes Strong Lake so particularly melancholic in a way that, at least for me, but I think also for a lot of other people, it's a world that stays with you a little more vividly than some of the other worlds you encounter in Dark Souls. But I would definitely say, in that sense and for that reason, it is also an acquired taste. I love Sekiro. Yeah, I wouldn't fight you on that. I don't know if I could pick a favorite of Miyazaki's games, but when I've been asked that before, I've often gravitated towards Sekiro. I spoke about that at PAX a few years ago too. I think for me, I mean, there's so much cool stuff about Sekiro, but I think it's the best use of very different and complementary multiple endings to a game to bring out a special kind of meaning that you don't get from the individual layers. Ha! Freedom! Absolute boarding paradise! What boss are you talking about, Grail? I would fight you on that. I think I would certainly not dispute that Elden Ring is very hard, but compared with something like Dark Souls 2, I would not use the word unfair to describe it. It feels much more of a piece with something like the original Dark Souls in terms of its approach to punishing player mistakes for me. Interesting, Chrissy. I would just ask you to tell me more. Yeah, when you say grueling in a different way, like, how does that manifest for you? What kinds of experiences are you talking about? Asking as someone who, as I think we talked about way back in Symphonia, is interested in those games but has never really sat down and played them. Oh no! Speaking of cold, harsh realities, Grail, and brutal unfairness. Damn, the deck collectors are just like the Ivory King. I hope this wasn't a mistake! Oh, sweet, another orb. The Spirit Orb of Soaring Trees. I thought we got that one already. Maybe there are just 2 green orbs. Or Innominat has succeeded, and I am the one who is giving in to despair and hatred. Oh, okay, I must be thinking of the monolith. Oh, so that was down below. Got it. I forget if this has come up on the stream before. Maybe I'll wear it for some of the side quest post-game stuff, but one of my favorite acquisitions from PAX in recent years was, I think it was a Fangamer thing. One of the vendors there has a Silent Hill 2 shirt that's just an homage to the dog ending, where James finds out that all the nightmares that were happening in Silent Hill were just the result of a Shiba Inu who was working controls from this control room. And he collapses and says, "It was all your doing." And so it's just a picture of that dog and like James's pure terror on his shirt. I love that. I don't know whether Evie loves that, but I have a lot of love for that. Okay. Well, we're back to a save point. That seems good. And I know we opened up a lot of new areas now that we have the geoboard. I don't know. Maybe it would be easier to escape. That just feels like a bad decision to me. Yeah, I think the most closely I can relate to what you're talking about, Chrissy, is I think I would call it more of an idle game thing than a cozy game thing, but I think this has come up in the stream before. In Ni no Kuni 2, they have this whole mostly idle kingdom development mechanic, and just putting in the relatively like low touch but still pretty grueling effort over many hours to actually develop all of the aspects of it. That does feel like to me kind of like taxing in a special way that's different than combat based. So I think there certainly might be something there. Oh yeah, okay, so there were a couple of the other gates, but I really don't think we have the kit to deal with those right now. It's definitely something. I hate these scarabs, or beetles, whatever you want to call them. Padre, I think that was Grail's way of saying, I don't like Breath of the Wild. But maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, Grail.
I'm ready for this.
I wouldn't be having the worst time if there were an easier way to get more items. I'm just anxious about the power differential combined with not being able to revive characters. Fangamer is always great, Chrissy. We always check them out. Pins are weirdly hit or miss at PAX. I mean, I love Rescue Pets, speaking of idle games, because they're corgi themed, and so they have really high quality and adorable corgi pins, of which I have several. But Fangamer is always great for kit. New York City Games, I think it's called. They always have a great offering when they go. And oh my god, I'm blanking on the name of the the one dial-up games was the one which they mostly do like retro games and collectibles, but it was there this time around that Dan found these great old school, highly sought after action figures of the Final Fantasy VII cast, and I found the Tales of Zestiria and Tales of Zestiria 2 collector's editions. The Train Graveyard! Awesome pottery. That to me stands out as one of the examples of some really cool and thoughtful content that they added that doesn't take them off the map, but gives interesting character study and fleshes things out more. Wait, pottery, so remind me, did you finish the original Final Fantasy VII, or are you like alternating between them? I know I had in my head that you were working through OG Final Fantasy VII. I don't know that I realized you were also working on Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think more in keeping with the like the mythological theme, Grail, I would say this feels more like a labyrinth to me than open. Like if it were open, then at least we'd be able to see all the paths at once, and I imagine in my head at least it would be easier to navigate than this. But maybe that's a misconception on my part. Oh, that's right. You paused once you got to the that particular terminus of the story. I do remember that now. Yeah, speaking as someone who is holding, what, at least 4 JRPGs in his RAM right now between Berseria and Fantasia and Vesperia and Destiny, I can totally appreciate the need to manage games according to your RAM.
Close one, but I am the victor.
Grail, you've literally been watching this whole playthrough. You know how infrequently I mess with any of the kit with these characters. I gave a whole little reflection on why I think that's thematically the case and why that's interesting. That might have been while you're gone, though. I'm still gonna shit on you for not remembering it, even if it happened when you weren't here. I will do that, Grail, but I will put it off for as long as possible. Because again, to Pottery's point, I worry that if I do anything else besides navigate through the dungeon, I will totally forget where I am and lose my place. I think this is an area that we can access with the geoboard now, though, that we didn't access before. Unless I'm a crazy person, which is totally possible. So, no, fuck that. How can they go faster than you when you're on a geoboard? That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, Pottery, I feel you, by the way. That's kind of where I'm at in terms of trying to publish this article and then also get out thoughts on Arise before the DLC and then also make plans for working through the DLC itself. It's an embarrassment of riches, and there are worse problems to have than that, but they are also problems. Oh, it allows usage of a break soul without spending souls. That seems useful. I'm gonna equip that. Yeah, maybe it is time to just go through some of the kit. So, we've talked this to death with the equipment in Zestiria and Berseria, so I don't want to belabor the point, but it's just... Maybe it's my fault, but working through equipment in games is usually not exhausting to me. Like, the mere prospect of doing it in Berseria and Vesperia just feels like total anathema to me. Yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, as I understand it, will just consume your life for the rest of time. Which, I mean, again, worse problems to have. Yeah, alright, fine. I will cave to the hive mind. and go back to the highway. But I'm not happy about it. I'm sure we'll all be happy in terms of making things flow a little bit better, but I want to be clear. I'm not happy that I have to do this. And I'm going to blame the game for it and be really mad. No, I'm kidding. I am glad it's not just me in terms of my feelings about these systems, Pottery, so thank you for that. And it's not an equipment upgrading thing. I mean, I felt like it was a little bit of a chore in Vesperia, but I was willing and interested to do it in a way that I'm not in something like Berseria. Grail, you're a bad influence. We're working through the end of the main story. Then we're going to do side quests. No, but obviously it's a family affair. If we're feeling like exploring some side quests and taking a break from the never-ending labyrinth that is Innominat's body, I am willing to accept the group sentiment there. They really do make it so hard to see the relative stat improvements. Final Fantasy VIII is still one I have to play at some point, Chrissy. Speaking of holes in my gaming history that I need to fill with the 0 time that I have to do so. I kind of missed the train on that one just because people in my world were so down on it for so long. I assumed it was not worth my time, but especially as I've gotten further into Final Fantasy as I've grown up, I don't really feel like that's a sound excuse anymore. I'm a shocking guy, what can I say? No, I have holes. That, you know what I mean. I have gaps in my gaming history. That's a really specific timing recommendation, Grail. Where is that coming from? Like, you think it's worth working through the whole dungeon just to have it done and behind you and then do all of the story content in one go? Is that the mindset that you have? I was going to say, as long as Pottery has brought up the idea of hot takes, I would call that a radically hot take, Chrissy. You say some circles. I would most people would raise their eyebrows at that, I would venture. All right, let's see if we can do some quick equipment optimization. We already did Velvet. I think we did Laphicet enough. Well, all right, we'll wait and see, Grail. We'll wait and see. Yeah, all right. I'll own it. As I'm seeing some of these stat jumps, Aaron was dumb for waiting this long. But I'm still going to beat on the game a little bit because, again, in basically any other game, I would not be so disincentivized to do this. Like, and people I think know this from having, been through other Tales games with me. This is not just how I am with games. I'm usually much more engaged with doing things like rekitting characters than I am with Berseria and Zestiria. Yeah, no arguments from me there, Pottery. It's also like, I mean, this is maybe an unfair comparison because different games, but especially when I'm, working on the study of two games that do very thoughtful and narratively interesting things with very special and meaningful swords, to just have sort of the total fungibility of weaponry and items here is a little deflating in contrast. Are we having fun yet? I'm having fun. Wait, so what are you saying there, Grail? Can you give us another history lesson? Because I know this came out very shortly after Zestiria, but are you saying that they felt as if it had to come out quickly because Zestiria was controversial? I think that's okay. Yeah, something tells me, even on the basis of doing this, we're gonna have a much easier time when we go back to that dungeon. I know, Pottery. I'm telling you, I don't think I'm going to suddenly have an about face after working through the study and suddenly say that Vesperia is my favorite of the Tales games, because that's a tall order. And we all know which is my favorite right now. Say it with me in unison. Tales of the Abyss. But I will say, spending more time in that world and thinking about what it is that they're trying to say, I have found myself falling in love with just all of the little touches and details. You see it really in every aspect of the game, like so many thoughtful side conversations and side quests in a way that's very much in the spirit of games like Tales of Symphonia, but I would say in some ways even more sophisticated. And the weapon design rings totally true to that. I'm with you there. Oh, thank God, Eisen's the last one. I was about to explode. I guess just beefing up his attack will be adequate. Alright. And then I guess we'll go back and see if of the new kit we've equipped, any of them are available for enhancement. I feel like that's the most intuitive way I can wrap my head around doing this, at least. Fuck me. I don't know, Grail. On the Zestiria Berseria thing, I mean, I'd be interested to hear whether there were any, like, developer discussions about it or stuff that they said about why they published it in the way that they did. I kind of assumed, based on the continuity of releases and there being a small gap between it, it was just like, I mean, you play Zestiria, and like we talked about at the time, there are clear continuity indications in terms of them foreshadowing what they want to talk about in the prequel, so it didn't feel like something that was maybe rushed because of poor reception to me. It felt more like they really wanted to give people the opportunity to get into Berseria right after Zestiria and see it as kind of like the kind of conversation that we're having with them on Tales of Praxis. But that also is just all inference-based. I haven't read anything about it either. Pottery, I see you trying to do the subtle mind manipulation on me to eventually get me to say Vesperia is my favorite. Tread carefully, because it might work. It doesn't take much to push me over the edge on stuff like that. No, you're right. Subtle is being too charitable to you. It is extremely overt. I think for me, Grail, I wouldn't even say it comes down to best looking. I would say it feels like kind of the most just cohesive and sensible aesthetic, by which I mean sort of the way in which the art style resonates with the original voice acting and the musical scoring. When all of those three things kind of play together very naturally, it gives you a certain feel like, yes, this world is just, it's, well, symphonic, I guess, to borrow the term which Tales of Symphonia stole for itself. And I always feel that that way whenever I enter any area in Vesperia. Like Dawngrest, the theme of which we've talked to death.
My people, you must always live with great vigor and hold hope for the world and for our future. Man can turn reason into disorder, but also can we surpass it? Our true power is in transcending.
Oh, this was the founder of the Exorcists, whose name I can't keep in my head. Claudin. Yes, I can.
Without hesitation. Hold hope in your hearts. Hold hope for tomorrow.
Transcending the possible to achieve the ideal.
Lord Artorias, I have successfully translated all of the documents left by your predecessor. However, I have concluded that, for the time being, it is impossible to form pacts with all 4 Empyreans.
As I feared, not even my predecessor could achieve more than 2. I suppose using the 5th Empyrean is my only option.
Is that even acceptable? Doing so would require...
I will do whatever needs to be done. I betrayed my teacher. I betrayed the mission he gave his life for, that he entrusted in my hands. For a time, I thought I could bear the weight of my sins and go on living, with Celica by my side. But now, she's gone.
Yes.
Man can turn reason into disorder, but also can we surpass it? Our true power is in transcending the possible to achieve the ideal. I must bring about the ideal world. I couldn't protect the people I loved, but this, at least, I will accomplish.
Arthur,
Huh? What is it, Velvet?
were you just talking to someone?
No, I was just thinking out loud.
Oh, okay. I finished making dinner. Tonight is prickle boar stew. Plenty of meat, but not too heavy.
Sounds great. Let's hurry on back home then.
Artorias' voice?
I don't know exactly what all that means, but it kinda sounds nice.
I suppose. Actually, it doesn't make much sense to me either. It's too dense for me.
What's his name? Help me out, guys. I'm blanking on it right now. I know he voices Elfin in Tales of Arise. And also a million other voices. But Ray Chase, thank you, yes. Too many names to keep track of in Aaron's head. So that was a very interesting skit, by the way. I was like trying to absorb that and keep track of the conversation and everything else. But I remember, Grail, I think it was you who brought up a couple streams ago this idea that Claudin could so easily be a Martell figure of the past in terms of having a particular ethos for wanting to improve the world and then his followers misinterpreting it. And the extended quote that we read in that book definitely read that way to me, where he was trying to give humanity hope, and the Exorcists evidently took the wrong lesson from that. But also, especially within the context of the Tales series, and even within the context of the games we've played, like, you don't need to look any further than something like Tales of Symphonia to see the language and importance of forming pacts with summon spirits in order to change or improve the lot of humanity in the world. And so that idea that Artorias had tried and failed to figure out how to form pacts with all the four Empyreans, and this whole plot with Innominat was more of a failsafe or something that he felt cornered into than his initial plan. That's a really interesting different color on Artorias. I'm really glad we stumbled upon that scene. Yeah, this is also a great theme, Grail.
Take a look at this.
Great. Let's do this one Rangetsu style, guys.
Eye of meat and mushroom spore, tender parts of prickle bore.
I don't know, gang. I find myself, oh, we're a pirate legend! Forget about the interesting point I was gonna make. We just got a trophy. We've sailed every water and discovered every treasure. Awesome. I feel accomplished about that one. I liked that. Yeah, that's their common folly, isn't it, Grail? Snow globe of growth. Received from the inhabitants of Tipo Island. The flower inside blooms as its owner grows. Awesome. I love it. We have something else to find here, so let's do that.
Ship setting sail.
What I was going to say was just, I really find myself going back and forth on the skit-based storytelling, because I know this has come up a number of times before. I definitely see your point, Grail, in terms of how, I think it was you who said this, Grail. Maybe it was Pottery. But one of you said how it's, something that might be seen as cutting corners in terms of just being easier to manage in terms of development costs and timelines. And I get that. And definitely after we had that conversation, I felt like, so I'm just going to dismantle everything that we're not using because I feel like we're at that point in the game. I felt like going back and playing Tales of Arise after talking about sort of the excuse of skit-based storytelling. I noticed all of the skits in the story in a way that I didn't the first time through. But also, I mean, especially for the Tales game, think about something else that we've talked about before, namely the fact that, unlike a lot of JRPGs, they have this really cool, like, textured aspect to their media representation where, yeah, you have the gameplay, and yeah, you have the cutscenes, but you also have these really cool animated like mini shorts between the intro and the outro and the key scenes that you get in every act at important moments. And so I think there is sort of what I would say is a more charitable way to read the skits, where it's not as if it's an excuse for kind of lazier storytelling, but rather that it's a kind of just different form of expression that adds that kind of texture to the story, almost like it's a little bit of manga, right? Like you get these different windows into scenes in a way that plays and reads very differently than what you would get from a cutscene. Yeah, and granted, Pottery, like, Arise has a very different style of skit, but for me at least, like, I feel as if you can run the same argument for the older style skits. Like, I'll tell you, one thing that was cool to me in looking at the, I think it was the art book for Tales of Destiny in the premium director's cut edition, is in all of the concept art that they feature, they also show all of the illustrations for like all of the different expressions and positions for the characters in the skits. And that really made me recognize in a way that I hadn't thought about before, man, this really is like a whole artistic effort and style of expression that you get in the Tales games that's different than what you get in a lot of other JRPGs. So it might not be what everyone goes in for, but I think it's unusual in a way that I think adds to the overall aesthetic of the Tales games. Alright, well there, now we have a ton of materials. We can't enhance any of these more, but at least we have a ton of materials. Alright. new title. There you go. Well, we're kitted out. I will say, to Grail's point, one thing that I think is a fair complaint, especially from Tales veterans about the more recent skits, is the fact that they're now part of the mandatory game language, whereas they were optional additions before. That really does make it feel like it's a different element of the design language than it used to be. And that doesn't mean it has to be bad, but I think one of the fun things to me about the skits in the times of Symphonia and Tales of the Abyss and everything like that was the idea that it's a whole, not lesser layer of dialogue, but a dialogue that is special because you as the player are choosing to add those side conversations into your experience of the story. And of course, that same argument doesn't quite apply to the skits that are hard-coded into the main storyline. Yeah, I think I said this before, Pottery. I don't know if I would categorize my problem as the skits being plotting in Tales of Arise. Maybe, I think we also talked about it before, potentially just being like the overall length of the skits, which might be what you mean by plotting. But I do have this weird experience with Tales of Arise skits where even when I'm sitting down and actively, singularly engaged with the game, I find my focus weirdly drifting off during the skits, which does signal to me that there's some kind of lack of alignment between my engagement as a player and the way in which they're representing the conversations there. No, fair. And plotting is a good word. I just wanted to, I wasn't sure whether we were talking about the same thing or not. Yeah, I think the interesting challenge for me, Chrissy, with thinking about that, like the dialogue is just when you're in a JRPG like the Tales games, there's just such a volume of dialogue, which I think on net is a good thing, but that I think can make it all the more impactful in terms of the different representational formats that are used for those different dialogue modalities and whether you choose to make stuff optional or mandatory and how you represent it. So especially when you're playing through all of them, like modes of representation and like little differences in them that you wouldn't expect to be that significant, you really feel over like, you know, the 60 to 80 hours that you spend in those worlds. Where's the nearest warp point to Innominat? Is it Logris? I feel like it might be Logris. Maybe it's Exen East, isn't it? Would that we could warp right back there. Oh, can we warp back to the dungeon directly? Alright, let me see if I can just do that then. Does the other type of bottle just get us out of dungeons? I can't find a way to access it. Yeah, I can't figure out how to get to the other bottle type. Yeah. That's alright, we're pretty close. And now that we have better kits, I imagine we'll just slice through the enemies like butter to get back to where we were. So that's something at least. Sometimes you gotta invest a little to get a lot. Am I right, my friends? Yeah, I definitely found myself laughing at a good number of points in Arise. Although I do feel like the storytelling on the whole is a little more earnest and a little less willing to laugh at itself and have kind of tongue-in-cheek jokes than something like, say, Zestiria with all of the punnery and Lila's fun and Edna poking fun at Meebo and everything like that. One gets fun in Tales of Arise, but I think I know what you're saying about it just kind of being a different stripe, Grail. All right, and we're back. Let's do a litmus test. How hard are these angels now? Oh, I promised I would look at Velvet's arts layout too, didn't I? I'll do that after this. Yeah, they are still harder than they should be, isn't it? No, Chrissy. So the one that I played right after Symphonia, Dawn of the New World, was a direct sequel. And then the one that I'm playing off stream right now, which was actually the first Tales game ever made, Tales of Fantasia, takes place much later in the continuity of that same world. But those are the only three that take place in that world. That's true. As Grail reminds me, so one of the fun things, I don't think this came up very much in the Symphonia stream, Chrissy, but the Tales games are also great for little Easter eggs or cameo references to the other games, especially as the series has continued for decades and developed more of a history and a lore. And so one of the fun things about what they do with that in Berseria is that they weave in a lot of islands because it takes place in this kind of world that is organized according to islands, where if you look at all of these different places where you can send out expeditions and collect items, they're basically all little allusions and winks and nods to the other games, and bring in relics that are not quite the literal objects from those other worlds, but are close enough that we've spent a decent chunk of time theorizing with our tin hats on during this game of how did all of these items end up showing up in this world? Is there a reason for that? Can we explain it? And we've had more than a few theories, but yeah, so as Grail points out, we have X-Sphere C, where we found a statue of the goddess Martel. So, and also the coin, which acts as basically Eisen's tether to the mortal world, for want of a better, easy description of it, is a coin representing, on one side, the goddess Martel from that whole world of Symphonia and the other games, and on the other side, Daus, who is the kind of villainous presence in Tales of Fantasia, which belongs to that same world.
I'll end this quickly.
I'll finish this. Ready to die? Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem.
Chrissy, it's funny. I was talking about this a while ago. As we might have discussed, I had such mixed feelings going through Tears of the Kingdom because parts of it felt like it was really just a Zelda game that was no longer made for me in terms of what I want to get from Zelda games. So it felt much more weirdly grindy than I was expecting. But then what I found was, A, when I got through the story, I really loved the story, and I thought it was one of the more tightly and compellingly told Zelda stories that I've played. But also, B, then I took a break from it for weeks to do other stuff and work on the Tales games and everything else. And then I found myself just naturally going back without agenda to just hang out in the world and go spelunking and find some of the special outfits and things like that. And when I was just dipping in and out of it without sort of the agenda of working through the story and just kind of going on unexpected adventures, I found I was really able to rekindle my enjoyment of it, which made me feel, as much as anything, that it probably was a game that was designed primarily around that kind of will to exploration rather than being narratively centered. Which is ironic, given, again, what a compelling narrative I would say it has. But yeah, so I did. I spent, a decent amount of time in the underground area. What is it called? Is it just called the Depths? Already, it's been too long since I've played it. Mapping that out and finding some of those special items. That was a lot of fun. So I do imagine I'll probably, when I need a break in the midst of all of the Tales of Praxis, I will probably venture back to it. Which reminds me, since we're halfway through this stream, and I see 5 people watching, and there have only been 3 people so far whom I've seen who contributed to the poll. If you love Tales of Praxis, and you like being part of this real-life JRPG party, and you want to have a voice in what we play after Tales of Berseria, that's the poll. Please contribute to it. I don't want to have to just spin a wheel between the 3 different games that have been selected as options so far. Grail, I don't think you're allowed to ask me that, because I'm in the middle of writing an article about Dimlos and De Nomos. I will say I love the Master Sword because I think it's classical, it's Excalibur, it has a very simple and magical mythos all its own. And so I think it's just kind of timeless. I mean, part of the reason I'm spending so much time on this study is that Dimlos and De Nomos have been really, really interesting, not just set pieces and stories, but contrastive representations of individualistic will to dwell on and study. So I think I would almost say, for me, it's less a question of which I would choose and more a matter of, do we have this orb? No. And more a matter of thinking about like the different conversations in which we can put the magic swords of the Tales games. I have a footnote in the article draft right now saying basically, look, I think these 2 swords in particular are really interesting for reasons I'll go into to put in contrast with one another and see as 2 halves of a single whole. But lots of other magic swords in the Tales games, right? You got the Eternal Sword, you got the Key of Lorelei, you've got the Divine Relics of the Armatus. So it would be an interesting exercise to see, okay, if we want to try to organize our thinking about these games' stories in relation to their magic swords or other like central tools and weapons, how many like layers of comparisons and contrasts can we draw that can enrich our understanding of the series as a whole? Why are you saying the Eternal Sword is racist? Because it can only be used by elves? Or half-elves, right? But you can get a magic ring to make it anti-racist, and that makes it all better. Also, remember, it's like, it's less about the sword being racist and more about, like, mythos being racist at the sword at the end of the day. You're an elf, don't touch me is a good tagline, though. I did post the poll on Twitter and Facebook, dude. Reddit, I want to lure in more of the sub through the articles. I don't think saying that we're doing a stream is gonna strike the right tone for the people who are gonna get the most out of it. I'll remind you, Grail, you found us through my sharing an article, so there's a method to With the Terrible Fates distribution madness. Sometimes. Yeah, Chrissy, going back to what you were saying about Tears of the Kingdom, I appreciate that I'm not the only one who felt that way about it. I really feel like, as I said, I mean, part of me just feels like they're making it for a different generation of gamer now who's interested more in stuff like just open world, sandbox, use these tools to build whatever out of the environment, and stuff that gameplay-wise is just not super interesting to me. And so for me, at least, I think some of the cognitive dissonance just comes from, I don't even know if I'd call it ludonarrative dissonance or just a dissonance in what I expect from Zelda gameplay and what I expect from Zelda's story, because I think the weird thing for me is the Zelda story that I've always loved is still there in the way it always has been. It's just the mode of engagement with it is radically divergent from what I expected or grew up with. Well, I will admit, it is hard to go up against Omega Smartass, but as Magnum Omega Smartass, I'm always willing to try. No, Chrissy, don't worry. You are not literally the only respondent to the poll. But the last time I talked about it, which was, I will grant, on Wednesday, the only respondents were you and Pottery and Grail. So the totality of the respondents are in this chat and had all requested different games, which, I mean, viva la différence, and it's great to see the diversity in opinions, because that's part of the magic of the real-life JRPG party. But in terms of, well, speaking of the themes of my new article, in terms of coalescing our will into something that is singular and actionable, it's not exactly de nomos. Alright, so Grail, while we're finishing this battle, throw some Velvet Arts for me. That would be better on her palette. And I'll reorganize things once we get out of this, since I keep forgetting to. Yeah, that's interesting, Grail. I feel like I've played games like that, but I'm gonna have to put that in the back of my mind and mull it while we work through this, because I can't think of any examples right off the top of my head. I guess depending on how one wants to read Nier Automata, one might say it's like that, in a certain sense. I don't know if that's the most intuitive reading of it, but it definitely has elements of that. I think I just went in a circle, didn't I? Oh, okay, so this is just a circle on this side. So does that mean we want to go to a different area? Because I just want to make sure. Okay, we were going to do her arts. I will say this is not the same thing as splitting over disagreement, but like I've been saying, part of what I'm thinking about in terms of Tales of Destiny is the way in which characters join the party for certain reasons at certain times and then go their separate ways thereafter. So I think there are elements of sort of thematically consonant ideas in there. All right, Rising Falcon good at the end of the line. Well, we have that. There you go. And that's what? Wind. Is that right? Yeah, wind. Okay. Oh my god, so many arts. Alright, so let's see if we can put together a wind one then. Swallow dances may be good to start with. Into what? Okay. Oh, no, that's Shell Splitter again. Does she have more aquatic stuff? And a full one of hidden arts. Do that. So what are everyone's big weekend plans? Aaron tries to vamp while remapping arts in a game whose art system he still only has a meager understanding of. Oh, maybe fire. Maybe fire would be a good one. Dragon to... Edge. Free until it isn't. I feel like that could be either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what it becomes not free with. I mean, that seems like a decent consolation, all things considered, Chrissy. I thought about breaking out the sake for the Friday stream in honor of Rokuro and his great duel with Shigure, where they shared sake before they dueled, but I figured between the labyrinthine nature of the final dungeon and the strength of the enemies and trying to think through the end of the story, we didn't need to introduce alcohol into the situation. Maybe when we get to the side quests afterwards. Speaking of being fucking lost. Yeah, that conceptually makes sense to me, Grail. I don't know if there's a lot of fun for me to find there, but it's worth giving it the chance. I think when it works, I do find fun in it. And it's fun to think about what it's saying about the nature of the characters and their agency, like we did a few streams ago. So I can intellectually appreciate it. I just don't know if it's my favorite thing. It would be nice to know where we're going. It would be nice. It'd be nice if the geoboard were a little faster too. But beggars, choosers, etc. See, this is one of the reasons that I was anxious about leaving, because I feel like what little sense of direction I had, I lost. Okay, we have a new skit and an expedition is back. That makes me feel like we are heading in a new direction. That's good.
Take a look at this.
Eye of newt and mushroom spore, tender parts of prickle bore.
Half-hearted fortune telling.
Good
Love
luck
it.
out there. Don't come back empty-handed.
Show him how Ifreed's crew can sail.
Hey, Magilo, I just remembered something. You still haven't given me that 100 gold you owe me.
Why, I have no earthly idea what this 100 gold is that you're talking about.
Magilu was lying.
Don't be done with me. It's 100 gold. Pay up.
Ooh, cold as ever. I think I saw icicles coming out of your mouth. I risked my life accompanying you on your quest for revenge, and now you want me to give you 100 gold on top of that? Well, I've had enough of this treatment. I'm going home.
Okay then. So long.
You're not even trying to stop me! Surely you can appreciate that a feisty fighter such as myself is indispensable to your efforts to take down Innominat, yes? But I'm not heartless. There's still time to make amends. I can ignore these transgressions under the right conditions.
Okay. If either of us gets swallowed up by Innominat, the other one has to pay her 100 gold.
You lost me there.
We're betting 100 gold on who gets eaten by Innominat. If you win, your debt will be wiped clean. You can't complain about that.
Oh, I can complain, believe me. Bringing up this 100 gold that I'm not even obligated to pay, hiding your kindness behind your cold words, and I'm just getting started complaining. Do you think I wouldn't notice this attempt to take advantage of an emotional witch to manipulate me into helping you defeat Innominat?
Magilu,
I'm putting down 100 bajillion gold. That's how much you'll owe me if you make it out alive. You have 3 seconds to back out. 3, 2, 1. 0! That's on for real now. I'll have to stick around for my money. I guess I have no choice but to help defeat Innominat and Artorias and to bring you back in one piece.
you always have to have it your way, don't you?
That's not what you should be saying. I think you meant to say, thank you, Magilu, my best friend.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Magilu, my best friend.
Cuckoo.
But so we're clear, I'm staying alive on my own terms, not just because you told me to.
And you say I'm the one who always has to have it my way. But think twice before trying to put one over on the great witch Magilu, she who delivers retribution and comeuppance! If I cared, that is. But I don't.
I love their relationship. Chrissy, I love the pregnant pause of 3 minutes between you saying you'll be consoling yourself with Masters of Sex and then explaining what that is. You'll have to tell me how you find it. That sounds like an interesting piece.
You really think we'll be able to win?
I'd like to just tell you not to worry about it, but I know that can't be helped. In my mind, too much worry can make you lose battles you should be able to win.
I wish I knew how to be like you. I mean, except for turning into a demon.
It's just about keeping your mind calm, isn't it? Me, I try to think about what I'm gonna do after a big fight. Like, what I'm gonna have to eat, or what I'm gonna read next. Anything like that.
All right then, let me ask. What do you plan on doing when this battle is all over? You've already beaten Lord Shigure. Once Lord Artorias and Innominat are out of the picture, there'll be no better sword fighter in the whole world. What exactly will you set your sights on next in life?
First of all, I still have a ways to go before I'm truly better than Shigure.
What? But you've already beat him.
Only by fighting with 3 blades. If we had matched Greatsword against Greatsword, I wouldn't have been on his level. Besides, it's a big world. The next great opponent could be out there.
Definitely the sword fighting type.
You
And the
really are a
drinking
man
buddy
of
type.
unassailable conviction, Rokuro.
That's just because I'm a demon. What about you? Well, your next.
What? Who would write a book on Xenoblade Chronicles 3? That
Not as an
no one would be
exorcist,
so
but
crazy
as
as to
another
do
human
that.
being. Just to give you a fair warning. If you ever attack humans like other demons do, I won't hesitate to take you down.
Oh yeah? I'm pretty tough, you know.
Don't worry about me. When we win this battle,
I'll have the confidence I need to become even stronger.
Then I guess you've answered your initial question.
Yeah, let's go. We have a fight to win.
Damn straight.
Well, we're getting all the final battle skits. I have such bittersweet feelings about this, you guys. Yeah, I'll never get over. I don't know if he watches the stream, but this guy, Leo, who's a fan of the site. So I wrote this book. I don't know if you've heard. I wrote a book on Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Wittgenstein, and it took me I think 7 or 8 months to write, from gameplay through publication. This dude read it in maybe 3 days. So I didn't think any human would be able to do that, or willing to do that. But much love to that guy.
Even after we defeat Innominat, you'll
Yeah, for real. No, and I know he did, because he didn't just message me about it. He wrote out really thoughtful comments on his feelings about the whole thing on Twitter. It's a great thread. I'm sure you can find it. But it was great, because I think because of the depth of and involvement of the study, I haven't gotten that much direct engagement or feedback on it, besides people, thanking me for writing it and saying that they were going to read it. But he put what probably still stands as the most comprehensive and trenchant comments on it together in less than a week. So better him than me. Took me long enough to write the thing, let alone to read and proofread and reread it.
They'll be able to see me normally, right, Eisen?
Yeah. We spiritual beings like Malachim and demons will still be aware of each other like before, but nearly every human will stop seeing us, just like Magilu said. Does that make you sad?
Doesn't it make you sad? I mean, Benwick and the other pirates won't be able to see you anymore.
It's all about finding things to read that you are enthusiastic about, in my experience. But yeah, I feel you. I've noticed that too as I've gotten older, because I've never been a fast reader. I'm still not, but it definitely is the kind of thing with the way in which one consumes anything, I feel, where your level of engagement and interest really does, there's no motivation like that in terms of not only getting you to digest it more efficiently, but getting you to actually think about it, and take lessons from it, as opposed to just letting your eyes roll over it and then not really taking anything from it, like the sort of mindless consumption of gaming hype culture that we were talking about a few streams ago.
It doesn't matter whether they can see me or not. They already know that I'll always be right there with them. When I go back to being a ghost to them, I'll be sure to make their voyages very interesting.
Oh, Eisen.
Oh yeah! Back before they could see you, they thought you were a ghost haunting their ship.
Yeah, it'll be just like old times again.
So, your life will go on, alongside the pirates and their ship, even if they can't see you?
But our eventual parting is inevitable. That's something we can never escape as Malachim, for we live far longer than any human. Parting is always hard. If you don't want that pain, the only way to avoid it is to shun all contact with humans. Some Malachim never leave our heavenly realm, where the conflicts of foolish men are but distant rumble, hardly felt or heard. But to me, humans are an inspiration, living to their fullest with the limited time they have.
Yeah.
Not that Malachim are immortal either. We have our own ends to face, myself included.
Oh, Eisen.
I don't know if that day will come in 500 years or 1,000, or even tomorrow. So I choose to live here with them, moment by moment, giving it everything I've got.
Benwick and the other pirates know how you feel. That's why you won't be sad when they can no longer see you.
Yeah, I believe that's true.
But
It's okay to feel lost. Let yourself wander for a while. But whatever you end up choosing, decide it for yourself. In the end, that's all that matters.
Yeah. Okay.
Eisen is such a categorically resolved guy. It really is hard for me and heartbreaking to wrap my mind around his turning into a dragon. I do have to imagine it's just what we talked about during that one brief, pretty easy to overlook moment a couple streams ago when he said, I can't let the Abbey's philosophy go. and I'm going to have to exterminate them all to make sure it's really over. Like, that was such a quiet but telling, I think, hint at how his resolve could easily go beyond the point of what was healthy for him and corrupt him. Yeah, that's a good point, Grail. That would definitely be an origin story for a crazy old pirate man who talks to himself about this ghostly presence, Eisen. Yeah, Chrissy, that's a really interesting thing that your supervisor told you. I feel like at a certain point it's almost like it's interesting to think of it as a gesture of self-respect. Like, your time is too valuable to deeply engage with things in which you're not deeply interested. Like, you want to allocate that focus and attention just to those things that you really want to draw stuff from. Hard, of course, when the thing you really care about and want to comprehensively study is something like a very, very long JRPG with a lot of side content. But that's part of what makes it rewarding, too. Oh, Padre, you never have to apologize for that. I apologize to you because I know what that is like, and in my experience, it is typically not fun. Grail, are you asking me or Chrissy or just making a joke? Is there a more specific answer than we've seen so far? Because if there is, I don't remember it. And if it's inside content, I definitely want to make sure we find it. It feels like the kind of thing that right now I would say has been like adequately explained without, you know, fully explicating it. But if there's more, I definitely want to know it. Yeah, poor Chrissy, you must be lost when I was talking about, oh, it's so sad how he turns into a dragon. When Seraphim / Malakim, the sort of like good spirits in this world, of which Eisen is one, get corrupted by malevolence, that sort of fractious force between your beliefs and actions that we were talking about, they transform into various sorts of demons. And the one that's like the final ultimate manifestation of pure malevolence is an immortal dragon. And so you first meet Eisen in Zestiria, which is in the future of this game. This game is a prequel to it. And you meet Eisen as a dragon. And one of the characters in that game is Eisen's younger sister, who is basically trying to find a way to cure him of his state as a dragon, or barring that, put him to rest. And so that's only after that really harrowing journey and seeing all of these emotions through the eyes of his little sister, that then you go into Berseria and see him in life in this very different form. So it's a really, really cool turn of storytelling, I feel like. I'm appreciating it more now even than I did the first time. Well, then you're going to have to do some homework and find where it said, Grail, because I don't want you to just tell me, but I want to know. Get to work. You have your assignment. Oh, well, that's okay. It's okay. You type too fast for your own good. But I still want to know. It's not good enough for me that you told me. I want to know where it actually comes from and is sourced from. Especially if it's something like that, because I feel like that's enough outside the scope of both Berseria and Zestiria for it to be a weird explanation. And so now you've really piqued my interest and I want to know. Not a Medusa! A Medusa-type Malik. See, that's very confusing to me, that they're Malakim, but they manifest as things like Medusas, which we know to be like a canonical Hellion type from Zestiria, and even earlier, well, I guess that was a Therian earlier in this game, but Therians are still demons.
I don't think we have a chance.
There is some kind of supplement, maybe a novelization. This was something I was planning to break out next week. Some kind of extra literature that comes with the collector's edition. So actually, I mean, whether or not that ends up being in there, it'd be fun for us to crack it open and see if we find any fun supplementary content like that. Pottery, you are singing my tune, dude. I feel that way. I'm sure I've said this before on the stream, but that is my problem with Pokemon, and I always feel like such an incompetent old raven when I play, like, especially the new Pokemon games. Like, I played Violet, and you know Dan has such love for them and is so deep into them. And I just found myself messaging him in frustration over and over again, like, who in the universe is able to keep track in their head at all times of all of these type relations in terms of strengths and weaknesses? Like, for most of that game, I had to have a big chart out in front of me telling me, like, what the weaknesses are and which Pokemon to use in which circumstances, and it just... Like, I get that that's a meta that is very attractive to some people, but I feel the exact same way about the style of Tales game, too. It's just, I get what they're going for, I can appreciate it. I am not the kind of person who can lean into that system and really feel like he's doing it justice, to be honest. Vengeful Goddess. Yeah, Medusa is a Medusa Grail. That's what I was saying when I was giving the example of the Therian. Yeah, less stress because it's turn-based, but you still have to figure it out at the end of the day. So either, like, you have it tucked in your head after all, or you're going to need to be looking it up. So I get what you mean. To me, it feels a little bit like a distinction without a difference. Oh, Aizen has a revive spell. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, and I was specifically thinking of the modern ones, Pottery, because you're right. I mean, the old school ones, like when I did Fire Red, those are like so intuitive that it is easy to just reason your way through them. With the million new types that are, like, they're, I'm sure the people who grew up with them find them intuitive because they just learned them. But for someone coming into it in a later stage of his life, I don't feel as though the same intuition applies. We're in a decent spot. Grail, you never run out of new ways to say, I am a masochist and love giving myself a really hard time. Yeah, I really like that contrast, Pottery, because I'll tell you, I remember in Vesperia, like, you're doing it again. You're not so subtly trying to talk me into saying Vesperia is my favorite. I won't do it. You can't make me. But I think Fatal Strikes are a great counterpoint because they were a system where at the beginning of the game, when they were trying to show me, like, oh, these are the different type relations and this Fatal Strike is better against this enemy type, like, I never thought I'd be able to wrap my head around that because it felt too complicated, but I think Vesperia does have a nice way of, over the amount of time you spend in the game and the fact that there are only 3 different Fatal Strike types to remember and keep track of getting you to learn it and develop an intuition about it without spending a lot of time doing homework and memorizing your type tables and everything like that. I was surprised with how much it was kind of absorbed into my long-term brains without trying by the end of that. Tetra Detonator occasionally activates after spell absorber. The ultimate counter spell, the only 4-element art. That's awesome! Magilu just keeps getting more powerful. The Mystic Art. Yeah, it's interesting. You guys have me thinking about it because I've kind of been going back and forth I don't think I'll have a good answer to this until I get all the way through the article. Because there are certain types of player interactions and choices, like we talked about a while ago, that I want to highlight and think about in Vesperia and Destiny in this article. I find myself wondering whether Fatal Strikes are one that's going to fit in there, because I think they're a really cool element of the gameplay in Vesperia, and it does seem to me on an intuitive level really consonant with a lot of the themes that are central to the game, but I'm not sure yet whether it would be a hat on a hat with reference to what I want to talk about or not. But we can certainly talk about it either way. That's the joy of the stream.
It worked! Huge success!
Yeah, and because I was playing it off stream, literally everything except the Spiral Draco I did on the hardest available difficulty setting.
Show 'em how I freed Screw.
Which was fun though. I think just like that combat system makes sense to me. Like being incentivized to learn the Fatal Strike system really well. And again, like to your point, Pottery, I probably wouldn't be able to rattle off all of the different effects and relations like right now, just off the top of my head. But I sit down and I get in the mindset and my hands just know what to do and know which ones are which. And I think that says a lot in terms of the overall game design and the intuitiveness of the layout. In a way that Berseria, I think we might agree, is not quite. Yeah, for sure. The areas are really conducive to that. And in a way that makes sense, because again, like thinking about the way it folds in with the story and the themes and everything, right? Like the way in which it explains the various ecosystems of Terca Lumere, it makes a lot of sense that you would have those clusters of enemies of particular types and weaknesses in certain geographies. And they talk a lot about the different migrations or settlements or even the unusual patterns of monsters when that comes up.
Don't get him.
That's a very good point, Padre. That is super amazing. It's one of those things like we were talking about with interactive mystic arts on the previous stream with like Rokuro and Shigure, or Ratatosk and Richter in Dawn of the New World. I'm not sure how much the hunting blades are going to factor into what I want to talk about. I'm kind of going back and forth. Carol, as you might imagine, and as we anticipated, is a big part of the study in a way that I think you're really going to like. And so one kind of has to talk at least a little bit about the hunting blades in order to see like the whole picture of Carol, but I don't know how much depth they merit. One thing, actually, as I'm thinking about it now, one thing that might be interesting is I think there's something very, Vesperia and very cool about the idea that it's not just that Clint can use the Fatal Strikes against you in combat, it's also one of those instances in which the party basically just learns by seeing the model. Like, they see Clint do a Fatal Strike, and then Yuri is basically just like, oh yeah, super complicated technique, let me try it, and he like figures out how to do it immediately. That's something that I think is a pretty interesting model of just how the technique gets integrated into the party in the first place, so that might be worth looking at. I hadn't thought of that.
I thought we were done for.
Yeah, Chrissy, I think if you're able with your schedule to stick around for a number of the playthroughs, you'll have a lot of fun with that, because 100%, I really think it's only once you're playing all of these games in like sufficiently quick succession to keep them all in your head that you can really see not just how each system works, but also kind of how they speak thematically in relation to one another and what the differences mean in terms of the like the changes in experience to otherwise similar game worlds and character dynamics and things like that. So that's definitely one of the things that is increasingly becoming more fun as we get more games under our belt, as you can see from the conversation, I should hope. Yeah, interesting thought about the relationship between Carol and Clint, Pottery. That would, like, whether or not that was why Carol did it. And by the way, I think the fact that we can't concretely answer that question ties in with a lot of other stuff that I want to talk about in terms of Vesperia and how it deliberately, I think, chooses not to answer a lot of questions about its past, like what you brought up quite a while ago in terms of the Great War. I think that's one instance of many. But I think regardless of what the fact of the matter is about it, there's something interesting to be said in the continuity between, like, Clint having this giant sword and us meeting Carol when he has a giant sword. And then just as easily as he's been rejected by the hunting blades, he also immediately breaks his sword because it's not the right fit for him. But then he figures out what is the right style and what is the right fit for him. That's something that feels very thematically consonant with the rest of Carol's journey with the hunting blades. Yeah, no doubt, Grail. I think that's kind of why I was saying the Fatal Strike thing feels consistent with a lot of the other things that Vesperia is thinking about, because that's certainly not the only time when Yuri does that, or when they do similar things in the story. Okay, I think this is still a new area. This feels right. I hope. God only knows, we'll find out. Well, not only that, Pottery, grabbing and wielding a giant sword, and also resolving to wield and learn the technique of the Dawn Sword. So, more than one big sword central to his story in different ways. Raven is such a great character. I'm excited to upload my published analytical reaction to him, because I think I mentioned this in a previous stream, but you know, Pottery, it was you, I think, who largely turned me on to thinking about Raven for this piece. And the more I've kind of decomposed the relationships between the different supporting characters, especially in the second act, I think there's a lot to be said, not just about the relationship between Raven and Jaeger, but also how those are related to and contrastive with similar supporting relationships and what's going on with systems of manipulation in Act 2 of Tales of Destiny. I think there are a lot of interesting parallels, but with different outcomes that speak to what the two stories are thinking about. So hopefully that'll be interesting to you all. See, that message though, Grail, that's exactly how I feel, because like half the time, like my gamer intuition just says right away, oh yeah, this is new. Even if I couldn't tell you how it's different, it's different. But then if I stop to think about it, it's like, man, Innominat has a hold on my mind. Everything looks the same. Let me just give in to despair and be done with this. Two things can be true if Velvet has taught us nothing else, right? No, Grail, it's still on my list. So I'm thinking either it will be something that I review as a reference before I publish, or more likely, I'm going to use it as a nice little treat and reward for myself after I publish on the game. But I am still very excited about it. I am just sufficiently submerged in and overwhelmed by the text of the game itself right now, so trying to not make it any harder for this old man and his limited RAM. But I do appreciate you sending it. I am very seriously looking forward to it. I was just thinking about it the other day, actually, as I was sitting and thinking about Raven Schwan. Okay, so we have two paths, and I'm going to try not to get confused. Let's go this way first. Yeah, we've talked so often previously because it's such a prominent feature of like the expressive language of battles in the Tales games about just really thoughtful and interesting, unique lines in combat depending on who you have. And boy, the interaction between Carol and Raven in that Schwann fight that you're talking about, where Carol basically says in so many words like, I thought of you as a dad and I don't know what to do with this now and I feel so lost. Like, oh, every time that just pulls at my heartstrings. And then the way in which they turn that around, that Carol really, I would say in many ways, ends up being the one who saves Raven and redeems Schwann. Like, it's a lot to recommend this game that I'm not going to say is my favorite Tales game. Yes, Chrissy. I'm not going to hedge that answer. I think it absolutely does. In the strict sense of effect, such that it changes the dynamic, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a negative to my ability to study the games, but it definitely changes the dynamic. It's more of It's the whole rhetoric that we've been using in the marketing of it for With a Terrible Fate, right? I mean, I call it a real-life book club, and I think it's really like that. So obviously we have plenty to study and think about and talk about, and it's tremendous, but it is a very different activity than how I go through these games alone. Like, if you were to have a camera window into the way I play games when no one's watching, it's much more, I play on a harder difficulty, I'm much slower, I take my time. I'll sometimes react to things out loud, like talking to Evie when something really wild happens, but most of the time I'm just very silently dialed in and thinking about stuff. I'll take screenshots sometimes of moments that I want to come back to or be able to think about and reference in analysis. I'll take notes. You might notice if you pay a lot of attention on the stream, oftentimes when one of us has an interesting idea or we're talking about something, I will take notes on that too. I mark down timestamps and things that we talk about just for ease of reference and going back and writing things later, what I did with the Regal study. But yeah, so I would just say it's different. I wouldn't say it's worse by any means. In fact, I think it introduces a lot of cool new insights and voices to the analysis and study and discussion, especially for the study I'm working on right now. My first footnote is a citation calling out and thanking the stream, and especially you two, Grail and Pottery, because so much of the thinking and processing of those ideas, like we've just been talking about, is stuff that we've worked through on the stream. And so, my ideas and views on it are very different than they would be in a vacuum. But I will admit, I'm excited to play through any potential game, but part of why I've been hesitant to play through a brand new Tales game on the stream is because I worry, would it be too much for me to process and think about for the first time, seeing all this stuff fresh, while also being in the environment of working on the stream. But I think it's one of those things where a lot of it is just practice and developing sort of the community standards, which are great and awesome now, as you can see by our great and awesome real-life JRPG party. And, it was the first time I played the DLC to Zestiria, Alicia's Story, which we did right before Berseria. And that was great, and I loved it, and I didn't feel like I lost any of it for having played it for the first time on the stream. So I'm excited to play something new for the first time all the way through full length on the stream as well. Bye, Pottery. See you soon. Well, Grail, you're kind. I'll fully admit when I talk about the reasons that I play on normal for the stream, that's one of them. I try to be thoughtful with the gameplay always, and I'm much more thoughtful and tactical when I'm just playing on my own, but I do try to modulate the difficulty so that I can get away with looking away for a few seconds and thinking about messages and just button mashing or semi-autopiloting the characters in battle. So if I were playing by your standards, I would certainly not be able to get away with that. Don't worry. Yeah, well, I appreciate that too, Grail. And Chrissy, that is the other thing that I would say is really cool about the Real Life Book Club, of specifically working through the Tales series in this focus study of the overall games, because I think it's fair to say, and I don't think Grail would disagree with me here, nor Pottery, if Pottery is still here, but it sounded like Pottery just dipped for a minute, that when it comes to knowledgeable fandoms, Tales is one of those series where, yeah, it's one of Bandai Namco's flagships, yeah, it's pretty well known, but also, especially compared to something like Final Fantasy, it's still relatively niche, and I think one of the consequences of that is that the people who know it and are fans of it are really deep fans of it, of one variety or another, and so whether or not you've played all the games, chances are good you have pretty encyclopedic knowledge or a deep understanding of more than one of the titles. And so, I mean, I'm sure, Chrissy, you've already seen and clocked, even just over this stream, like, it's very much like a group mind activity where, you know, if there's something like, you know, some of the cameos or connections between games or aspects of game history that I'm not that familiar with, easy to say, you know, hey Grail, you probably know about this, tell me a little bit about this. And between the lot of us, we're able to patch together a pretty robust, if not entirely comprehensive, understanding of the series as we're working through these games, which I think definitely helps us to keep our footing, even as we're studying the games in this kind of live split focus context. Grok is a great word. That was one of my favorite neologisms that has kind of become adopted by technical philosophy. Like, that was a word that showed up a lot in my undergrad courses. Very important when you're doing stuff like conceptual analysis and trying to get on the same page with other people. Grail, you're justifying yourself to the wrong people. I mean, I'm perfectly happy with hanging out with you on the pure assumption that all you do with your time is hang out here and play Tales games and go camping, I guess. If you do other things, that's great, but don't feel as though you have to for our benefit. And, you know, you're a Tales encyclopedia. I wrote a book on Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Chrissy is in a PhD. Like, we all have our various palettes of insanity. So, which I take to mean we're all among friends here. With a Terrible Fate as a home for all colors of crazy.
Sorry to cut you down.
It made it further than it did last time, at least. Alright. To the next stage. I'm a little worried that we're getting to the final run-up, which in terms of the timing of the stream, I'm happy about, but it would be a bummer to get there just as Pottery left. I wouldn't ask you to elaborate, Grail. But I would say, in the spirit of the real-life JRPG party, everyone engaging on this stream is radically intelligent in whatever way matters to them, and in a way that is certainly meaningful to the stream and beyond. I hate the internet. I will have to check that out. I haven't even heard of that, Chrissy. That's true. We have not shouted that out in a while, but yes, for like eternal props to Pottery for not only watching the VODs, but taking the time to somehow catch up on all of them before engaging live. Like, I know that if I were in an audience on Twitch, I would not take the time to do that. So And Pottery had great like insights and commentary on the things that came up in the VODs back when they did that. So yeah, shout out to you, Pottery. If you're watching this in VOD form after the fact, I'm shouting out to you for the thing that you're doing right now.
I can feel him. Innominat is just up ahead.
Here we go.
Finally, time to repay my debt.
You just like saying that, don't you?
Ah, you saw right through me.
Oh, come on.
No,
it wasn't
Chrissy,
hard.
to each their own.
Nobody
You're
here is
good.
gonna do anything for anyone but themselves.
I can't deny that.
Your wheel is yours alone to hold.
That is our creed.
There are a lot of reasons that it would be interesting to situate Berseria in the study that I'm thinking about for Vesperia and Destiny, because, I mean, I think flavors of self-determination show up in so many of the Tales games, but between the way in which this group balances individualism with collective action, and then also things like the continuity of sword philosophy between Kurogane and the Swordians, there's a lot of connective tissue to ask, okay, given that this game uses a very similar language to these other ones, but it seems to be saying some pretty different things at the end of the day, I would say intuitively at least, how is it that it uses that language to express different things? Sure, the logistics are, this is a metaphysical nightmare mindscape designed by Innominat to embody himself after he was ejected from the world so that he can consume the malevolence of the world from a place outside of the influence of the proper spirits of that world. Come on, Pottery. I mean, Grail. Wow, excuse me. Oh my god. Innominat's influence is clouding my own ability to speak and think. But Grail, come on, it's first grade. Standard staircase stuff. Even this, actually, now just all of the games are bleeding together for me. But in all honesty, like, if you can picture in your head the final section of Tarkaron in the run-up to Duke, it has basically this exact staircase, except situated in a motif of darkness as opposed to pure light. That's interesting. I don't think it's the surplus of Jin so much as the dearth of background from the previous streams, Chrissy. Although, as I said earlier, two things can be true. That's right. That's the real lesson of collective action in these games, Grail. It's that in our hearts, we're all pottery breaking. Oh, I love that. Grail, I know you were mostly joking, but remember, one of the things that, and I might just write a commentary on this because I think it is interesting, but like, I think Kurogane is voiceless in the same way that the Swordians are voiceless, where they're only heard by the people with whom they resonate, and, you know, who are the right sort of people for them to speak to. And I think the fact that Kurogane expressed his intention to become a sword to Rokuro and only to Rokuro, and we hear about it after the fact when Kurogane is only turning himself into a sword, actually like creates the space for a thematic interpretation of like Kurogane as a sword that expresses itself in kind of the same way that a Swordian does, at least metaphorically, in a way that's kind of interesting. All right, friends. Take a deep breath. I don't know if there's any commentary I can add to this moment. I feel like we've done a pretty good job of pulling together all the different threads that have been really rewarding and fun to analyze throughout this third act. So let's strap in and see how things come to a head. No, Grail. The fun starts here. It stopped for you in your crazy playthrough, but this is where we're getting started. We've had a lot of fun. This has been a good one. I wasn't sure how Berseria would go, but I'm really happy with how it's come together.
Sorry to keep you waiting, gentle shepherd. The Lord of Calamity and friends are here to see you.
I can't wait to strike down the world's greatest swordsman.
You picked a fight with the Ifreed pirate crew. Now we're here to finish it.
Lord Artorias, I follow my own will now, and I'm going to stop you.
In my sword lie the hopes of mankind, the potential for a perfect world. Do you really believe that will without reason can break it?
Well, without reason. That's the first time you framed it up that way.
Your sword is strong. But it's still only a weapon, just like ours.
Why don't you test that theory? With your life, of course.
Ever since you hit me, I've had this really annoying feeling in my chest. But I can't figure out what it is.
Then I'll just have to hit you again and see if that helps.
I'm sure I'll feel better after I eat you. Arthur! I finally have an answer to your question. Why do you think that birds fly? Birds fly because they want to fly. They don't need a reason, even if their wings may snap and doom them to die. They don't fly for anyone's benefit. They don't fly because they were ordered to. Birds fly because they want to fly, and for no other reason!
So that's your answer.
Yes. Because that's who I am!
You were always like this. That sort of foolishness is what creates the demons and plunges the world into tragedy and despair.
Then you drive the demons out! Isn't that right, Shepherd Artorias?
That has been my plan all along.
If you want to kill us, you'd better finish the job! Because if you don't, I'm going to devour you!
Wow. Just think back to this versus her first confrontation with Artorias, too. Night and day. Wow, that was an awesome shot. There it is.
I'm gonna fly too. Right to your side, Velvet.
With a single stroke, I will put death into your beast. Speaking of Tales of Vesperia.
we'll have plenty of time to talk about everything to do with the ending. But one thing that's really interesting to me right off the bat about that initial confrontation is Velvet finally gives her answer to Artorias' koan, why is it that birds fly? And he says that her sentiment that birds fly because they want to fly is exactly what creates the demons. And that's so interesting to me because we've talked about how at the end of the day, the ethos of Velvet and her party is like what makes possible the Praxis of Sorey and his group in Tales of Zestiria. And to me, let's watch this. Wow! That was really cool. I'm not even mad. But so, that's interesting to me because, like, that exchange between Artorias and Velvet just shows to me how true that is and how far gone Artorias is down the rabbit hole of his dogma. Because he's just, at least on my reading of it, he's transparently wrong. Because if birds want to fly and fly, then there's perfect alignment between what it is that they believe and desire and what it is that they do in the world. Unless he thinks that there's some sense in which birds don't really believe the right thing to do is fly, which I think is kind of begging the question against Velvet. So it seems like Velvet is the one who's sort of in perfect continuity with the sense of purity that Shepherd Sorey brings into the world later, thanks to the efforts of Velvet and her friends, whereas Artorias has just sort of shown his hand in failing to understand how malevolence relates to humanity at all. Yeah, it's interesting what you two are saying, Grail and Pottery. I feel like maybe there's a certain way in which you could see both of your answers as right. Like, I almost see in him someone like Yuri, who has, at least at the beginning of Vesperia, like a very radically individualistic sense of justice, and yet he tries to enforce that justice on the world as the thing that is categorically right. And ought to be upheld as the single standard of honor. Actually, you know, I say that, and as I'm saying it out loud, I'm just describing Alexei. We're not identifying him with Yuri or Flynn. We're talking about Alexei. Alexei with extra steps, maybe. But at least along that dimension. Well, yes, and Grail. That's one of the many reasons that it can be fun to look at them in contrast with one another, because they hit many similar notes, but they're not the same at the end of the day. To wit, there's no analog between how Artorias is with trying to figure out how to form pacts with the Empyreans of the world, and then only submitting to his own feelings after failing at doing that, as we learned earlier this stream, and what it is that Alexei is up to with much more of a standard megalomaniacal plan to become the sovereign of the world, so to speak. Not to bring in Tales of Arise, just to use the word sovereign. I'm just using a fucking word. Well, see, Pottery, what we're suffering from right now is a symptom of me distilling what will probably end up being a 20,000 word article into a soundbite. When I say individualistic, I mean individualistic in the sense of acting as judge, jury, and executioner. So the kinds of things that he enacts with Rago and Kumar before he kind of refines the way in which he wants his ideals to be enacted in a public group forum. That kind of individualism where he feels like it's on him to enact his sense of justice and what he feels is right. Not individualistic in the sense of Yuri himself as the individual being the locus of that justice, but him being the one responsible for legislating it. Love this track, by the way. Speaking of Berseria themes that are bangers. What's this one called, guys? Do we know? Well, Grail, you also have to remember, because you keep forgetting somehow, you are playing on a radically different standard of difficulty than I am. So, like, I understand your frustration, but speaking of reason, there's a reason that's the case. Sometimes there's a method to the madness. Boy, interesting that you feel that way. I mean, I grant that maybe in the broader scheme of Tales games, they're not the most memorable, but in my head, I like hear them both as really epic and like overwhelming, but in different ways. Like the way in which this battle is decisive and high stakes is very different than the kind of confrontation, I would say is very different than the sort of confrontation that Sorey has with Heldolf, especially with that haunting, sickening trick that he pulls with Gramps, which, I mean, talk about battle centerpieces. Like, that's how I remember that fight, and especially Will after the Tales of Praxis playthrough of it, and that just strikes such a different tone with me than this. Yeah, but again, I take your point, Grail, and also this is not hard mode. So maybe the interesting observation is that they modulate some of the difficulty up at a much sharper rate than some of the other games do. Because I agree with you, the difference isn't always that stark between normal and hard. I mean, again, two things can be true. The game can be unfair in certain respects, and your rule set can make things more unfair. Depending on what one means by unfair, I suppose.
Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem. Radiant wing.
I feel like we should get Velvet back up on her feet, since this really is, in many senses, her fight at the end of the day.
Tenacious demons.
He's the reason, right there. I'll take care of you. Stand aside, Velvet. Not happening.
Remember that, not to interrupt this, but the 8th sacrifice of the maiden to Yamata no Orochi was saved by Susano by being transformed into a comb.
Why do you have my comb? That was the comb that Laffy gave me. Not you, Innominat. Of course. I'm Innominat, now reborn. And you're the Lord of Calamity.
That's an interesting thought, Pottery. Yeah. They feel like the same aesthetic.
Artorias. I'm hungry. My stomach is empty. My chest is empty. My body is empty too.
Yeah, I feel like that moveset would have been thematically resonant, Grail.
It hurts. It hurts so much.
He does feel old school in a certain way.
It looks like we won't be able to harvest despair by eating you anymore. Well then. Birds must fly, because they possess strong wings. Mankind must be suppressed, because it possesses great sin. Malevolence, tragedy, war, anger, tears, even love must all be suppressed. With the grace of my beating wings, I will grant humanity the tranquility it deserves.
I love these strings too.
Innominat, come, devour my despair.
Wow, that's really interesting. I'd forgotten that. What language is that? Maybe the ancient tongue. Oh, right, of course it is. Thank you, Greg. It's a sword.
Now, with the full might of my armadas, I shall suppress all creation.
It looks a little like Kronos. With a K, not a CH.
Filled with this much despair?
Was he holding it in check this whole time?
One misstep, and he would have become a demon. Such is the power of Artorias' determination, but also proof of his true nature. Oh, he can't lose! He'll never lose to despair!
Yeah, I'm thinking about that line too, Pottery. I wonder if it's just more sophistry that shows how lost and wayward Artorias is, or if there's some way to tie that logic to his experience of the world that's more charitable. It is an interesting twist. Like, we've talked about how much the Abbey, led by Artorias, is a representation of rote utilitarianism across the game. The ends justify the means. It's always the right thing to do to sacrifice the one in service of the many. I think an interesting twist on that, which is consistent, but kind of an unexpected way of extending that to like the nature of malevolence and individualism in terms of people as agents, is the way in which, when it comes down to it, it's not even that Artorias feels that there are certain aspects of humanity that needs to be suppressed. It seems, at least from that one scene, like it has more to do with every aspect of the world, including all of human nature, should be used instrumentally to achieve desired ends, so that even something like malevolence, the very thing which he wants to be purged, is something which he believes should and ought to be channeled if it can improve the world, which of course is what he was doing with the Therians all along. But for him to also like measure out in that determined way that the party is talking about his own human life in order to participate in that, I think is really resonant and interesting. Oh yeah, also Duke after he invokes a Lucifer, I can see that. Yeah, I guess what I was wondering about pottery was, I wonder whether when we look back at like the whole of Artorias' philosophy and how Arthur the man got there, if there might be like a hidden inference that we can justify that would make his logic make sense. Because you're right, there's a sense in which it's opposite, like birds fly because they must, and mankind must be suppressed. That is part of their nature must be inhibited because they possess great sin, right? But I wonder whether there's an inference working in the background of like, insofar as something is strong or conducive to the betterment of the world, it is obligated to uphold its nature, and insofar as something is deleterious to the overall world and its trajectory, its nature ought to be suppressed. Because then, yes, those are two opposite things, but they're also like two inferences from the same underlying principle. Which feels like Artorias is definitely one of those guys who I would want to go back and do the character study of to really understand what it is that he thinks he's saying and the maxims that he's enacting, but that feels consonant with what he's after to me. Interesting too, of the Tales games I've played, I feel like dual final bosses, where they're kind of two characters who are both important and operate on their own terms, are kind of rare and therefore interesting. Like, I guess you could say that about Graces. And I'm not thinking of any others off the top of my head, but I imagine there might be some I played that I'm forgetting about. But anyway, they feel relatively rare to me. So to see Innominat and Artorias on a par and then fused is, of course, a nice mirror to what happens with the Armadas, with Sorey and Rose and everyone in Zestiria, but also just interesting as a somewhat unusual structure for the final encounter. If we can stay alive. Yeah, and I wouldn't count the God Generals pottery. I think those are more in the supporting category to me. More like, obviously not 4 because there are 6, but sort of in the 4 generals motif from Japanese storytelling, which comes up a lot in games. Yeah, I had that in my head too, Grail, Van, and Lorelei, but I don't know. I kind of categorize that with Heldalf and Nautilus, where that is also a really interesting model, but I think it's interesting in the sense of a villain who has, like, co-opted or bound the powers of some other entity. Almost sort of like an inversion of what you get with Kronos and Hugo, where, you know, Kronos as a sword has kind of bound and taken over the abilities and agency of Hugo. So 2 entities, but not quite the same thing, as sort of like the tag team villains who are enacting the same plan for their own reasons, but in support of each other, that you get in something like this, or in... It's been too long since I played Graces. Graces might fall into more of sort of the possessive or binding category, but I remember it more in my head as having to do with the two of them on their own terms. But we won't really dig into that for want of spoilers. That's right! The most important dual boss of all, Black Dragon and Mythos. With the Black Dragon's radical idealism that in order to get to Mythos, you have to kill me. He does speak at least, though. Yeah, he definitely has a lot of cool moves, doesn't he, Grail? He heard me call the move cool and he felt compelled to show us again. At least it didn't kill that time. Bye, Grail! I'm sure you can take your time. I think we've got time to spare in this battle. Jesus. Yeah, talk about despair. Alright, we're not doing too bad for items. I was worried we were in a tighter spot. So now I have to remember, which path did I map her fire arts to? Circle? Is that right? Circle? No, I think it was X. Want that soul? Give me that soul. Oh no, you got that one. Rule of Rose? I've never even heard of that one. What's the pitch for that one, Chrissy? It's the back of its baseball card. I kind of wish for all the enemy names we were talking about, he had a somewhat more interesting name than Armatized Artorias. But it's accurate. You can't fault them for that. Oh, is Forbidden Rose, like, is it in the same series? I haven't heard of Forbidden Rose, I'm sorry to admit. Yeah, don't worry about it. Wow. That was quite the battle.
You've grown strong. Let us settle this here and now, Lord of Calamity.
I swear, we'll finish this.
Just in time, Grail.
We'll devour all this hatred.
Thank you, Grail.
Not done yet.
Oh, that definitely sounds interesting, Chrissy. Yeah, right up my alley.
Struggling.
Give up your fight. I will end the world's sadness. I have to end it.
Arthur's forgotten maxim.
Oh! Wow.
Don't despair. No matter what.
Spoken like a true hero.
Oh, that was awesome.
It's what you told me once, long ago.
On the day of the opening, Velvet, the Arthur you knew, died that day. It was always there, in the back of my mind. If only it hadn't been Silica and my son who were killed that day. If only it had been you two instead.
I thought the same thing. So many times. If it had been us, then I know you would have fought to save the world for us.
It's true. I wanted to save everyone. Such a pity.
Goodbye.
It's over.
I'm hungry. I'm hungry. Hungry. I'm hungry. I'm hungry.
No, it's not over yet.
Hungry. I'm so
I have thoughts on that question, Grail. We'll talk about it.
Your power is running wild.
No one is keeping his power in check anymore. This is bad. We still have time to kill him.
Wait! I'll do it. I endured it all, even though I was scared, even though it hurt.
That's not how I read it, Pottery, but we might have to rewatch the scene later.
I know.
I drank that gross medicine. I stopped myself from doing what I wanted to do, eating what I wanted to eat. I tried so hard. Why won't you give me this? I hate you! I hate you, Velvet!
Laffy said,
Wow.
you tried really hard. But you don't have to fight anymore. It's time for us to rest, Laffy.
Velvet, what are you doing?
This is the part I never forgot because it's so memorable.
Velvet will let Innominat devour her forever, with her forever devouring him in return. She will seal him while keeping him alive. An infinite contradiction. A perpetual cycle of destruction. Velvet, you can't!
You and I are part of Innominat, V. If he dies, both of us will die too. I dug my own grave. But you...
I don't care about myself! I'm not scared of dying as long as I'm with you!
Good. Then die. But only after eating, living, doing everything you want to in life. I really am horrible, aren't I? Just a selfish failure of a human being.
Grail, I'm gonna banish you to the Shadow Realm.
Despite all that, you still saved me. With your unwavering kindness and strength.
Yeah, agreed.
I didn't do anything. Velvet, you were the one who...
Fee, you must have seen it during our travels. Humans spend their lives in constant struggle. That's why they end up making so many mistakes. Even my poor brother. That's why I'm asking this of you. Please live. I was the cause of so much chaos and destruction. Help the world I ruined. Help people like me. Help the weak. This is my last selfish request.
That's not fair!
I'm truly sorry.
It's okay. I forgive you. Velvet, I love you.
Thank you. I love you too. Fee.
That would be an interesting exercise too, thinking about the difference between that expression of love and something like what Tyr says to Luke at the end of Abyss.
For her to seal an Empyrean all by herself. Humans contain more surprises than I expected.
Relax. These are the 4 elemental Empyreans.
Now you show up. Pretty irresponsible if you ask me.
You were mistaken. Without Innominat, the balance of our power will crumble.
The elements will clash in violence and ruin. The world will take millennia to recover from the destruction.
No!
To save the world from destruction, a new Empyrean is needed. A Malak of great strength and indomitable will.
Definitely based.
I'll do it. I'll be your new Empyrean.
Hold on a second, Laphicet. You can't just...
Let's hear him out.
You are part of Innominat. You're not lacking in strength. But the question here is one of your intent.
Just what do you wish for this world? What will you bring unto its denizens?
I want people to have another chance. A chance for them to right the wrongs born of their fallible spirits. To give those who dream of flying the time they need to rest their wings. So that in their strength, their weakness, their cruelty, their kindness...
He'd be the worst choice. He turns into a dragon.
...will one day stretch their wings toward the horizon.
May
Wow, I forgot that plays such a big role in this one too. Birth of the Flames of Purification. Yes, Dial, my man. Oh, come on in, Medusa. And the dogs! Why did they not give us a close-up of the dogs? Ah, this game.
We're really back on the ground. The Dragon of Light.
Good grief. Velvet's recklessness rubbed off on him.
Different kind of dragon.
Hasn't it, Laphicet?
Is that really Laphicet? But how?
That is his Empyrean form. It's also proof of his determination.
Like an oath?
Yes. Do I frighten you now, Eleanor?
Not at all. You've matured into a fine man.
So was that flame your true power as an Empyrean?
Demons. Malevolence. Did that fire get rid of it all?
No. I'm still very much a demon.
The silver flame has the power to cleanse a soul of its malevolence and change a demon back into a human. But it doesn't have the power to change people's hearts.
It just gives them another chance at life. Isn't that right?
Sorry. Looks like my sins run too deep to fix.
That's fine. It's a part of who you are, Rokuro.
You're still a softie, aren't you?
Well, that's just great.
Huh?
Most of the exorcists are wiped out, but the evil and chaos in people's hearts lives on. Gonna be tough going from here on out, folks. Yes, it will. Even still. Humanity will never lose its hope, or its prayers for a better future. Well said!
That is nice continuity, Grail.
The
Yeah, thanks for
Malachim
calling
have
that
free
out.
will again.
I would have missed that.
Some may even lend you their aid to help create this ideal future of yours.
I will spread the word. This world is now under the protection of the Empyrean Laphicet.
Would you mind not calling me that? I don't think it really fits who I am now.
But what would we call him?
I guess you're right. That was Velvet's name for you.
Okay, what should we call you then?
Call me by the name Eleanor gave me. One who lives. That's what Laphicet means. Translated into the ancient language.
That's so cool.
It's Nautilus.
I forgot the last shot was one of his blessing embracing the entire planet. That's fantastic. These games, especially these games in the last moments, oh man. Talk about the tear flowing out of your, the liquid flowing out of your eyes, Grail. But they can do such an amazing job of moving so quickly and yet seamlessly from the deeply personal, like those quiet conversations between Velvet and Artorias, and then Velvet and Arthur, and then Velvet and Innominat, and then Velvet and Laphicet, to the totally macrocosmic with looking at the entire world in a way that, to me, almost always feels really earned and emotionally resonant. I love that. That's true, Pottery, and they could have gotten away with that, of course, for the same reason that Symphonia did, because both of the games had prior games that gave the answer, so to speak. Although I guess Symphonia was a little different, because I would say, having played Symphonia as a kid before I ever played or knew about Fantasia, I think the game does a good job of implying the tree is going to be named after mythos in some sense, either way, even if you don't know it's going to be Yggdrasil. But yeah, and what a testament to it too, Chrissy, right? That you could come in just being familiar with some Tales games at the end and get a lot out of the ending. I'm glad that you did come in, and I'm glad that you did. We are going to have so much to unpack. I, for one, am glad that we saved the side content for afterwards. A, because I think that third act is beautifully paced and really moving and touching. Maybe besides all of Aaron's grinding and missteps in the final dungeon, but modulo that. But also B, because I think that, like most Tales endings, is the kind of ending where it will be helpful for us to sit and digest and think about it and talk about it, not just now, but over the next few streams. I think it's really interesting. You guys are going to come to Colorado and kill me because I'm going to make another Tales of the Abyss comparison. But one thing that did not stick out in my mind as much the first time I played it, that really does this time after playing a lot of the other games recently for Tales of Praxis, especially Tales of the Abyss, is that you might or might not remember way earlier in the Tales of Berseria stream, back when Arthur became Artorias and was called the Shepherd, I found myself saying, man, I'm not sure whether we're witnessing like the birth of the shepherd and like that concept being introduced into the way that the world works. And then later it became clear that that was a concept that predated Artorias. But I think what does seem to me in that ending to really be the case in terms of how this game is situated in the world history, especially relative to Zestiria, is it does seem like a mythopoeia. And if you're not familiar, or if you don't remember from when I talked about Dan talking about mythopoeia with regard to Pokemon, mythopoeia is basically like a religious or mythic origin story, like putting characterization and theme to an explanation of not just how the world came to be, but rather like how the entire cosmos came to be out of nothing and out of like the divine impetus for being. So a lot of what I talk about in Tales of the Abyss, when I talk about Tales of the Abyss and Kabbalah and reading it in the tradition of Jewish mysticism, is the idea of reading that entire game basically as a mythopoeic act of rectifying the universe. And I think one thing that's really cool in that ending is you really get to see like the entire new foundation of the world that is then taken as a given in Tales of Zestiria, and that makes possible the kind of redemption that the Shepherd Sorey is trying to bring to humanity, which Mautelis, in the way that a lot of these representations of the divine will in various mystic traditions are represented, prefigures and makes possible. So there's the idea of like divine creation and out of the void bringing something into being, and then the idea in many traditions that for one reason or another that which is created is imperfect and needs to be rectified and redeemed, right? Which is a theme that we see really clearly coming up with what Laphicet expresses to the Empyreans, that sort of shows he's worthy to become Mautelis and extend his blessing to the land. The idea that he doesn't want to perfect humanity, he doesn't want to make everyone happy, he doesn't want to suppress malevolence, he wants to make it possible for people to be imperfect and come to terms with themselves and grow into whoever it is that they want to be in the world, in the spirit of what Velvet said when she said birds fly because they want to, which is, of course, exactly what we then go forward and wrestle with in Tales of Zestiria, this idea of Sorey similarly redeeming the world not by turning everyone into a good guy or purging all evil, but helping everyone, hero and villain, to better understand what it is that they really believe and enact that in the world, whether it's Mikleo or Simone or Heldolf or Rose or really anyone in between, right? And I think the thing that's interesting that I want to think about, well, a few threads. I mean, there are many, but of course there's a connection in tracing the like the myth of Orochi and Susano and Amaterasu through the whole thing, because that's certainly a through line, like I called out with the comb at the end in that confrontation between Innominat and Velvet. But also, I think when you have that mythopoeic framework for creating the foundation and basis for human redemption, I think when framed in that context and this embrace that we've seen on the screen in the credits going back and forth, like the embrace of Velvet and Laphicet, and also the Lord of Calamity and Innominat, there's a certain sense, I think, in which the game is trying to express that this whole episode of basically humanity wanting to suppress its own despair and perfect itself in the wrong way, and kind of ends up redeeming itself through this irrational embrace of two like antithetical yet harmonized consuming forces. Like that, in some sense, that I think we need to drill down into more and specify is like the required precondition for then people to be able to really understand their own desires and reflect on how to impart those desires to the world. Like, I think what Sorey makes possible for people is not a live option in this world until everything happens with the Lord of Calamity facing Innominat and facing the particular shepherd that is Artorias. I think what's surely an interesting part of that too, and what I thought was really interesting with Artorias, because we talked in the beginning of the fight about how he seems to be willing to, use every aspect of human nature in a utilitarian way. But also, I think, as became clear, especially when Velvet drove his sword into him and he really broke down, it really seemed like one of those sad human truths of a Tales antagonist. At the end of the day, he was really wrestling with his inability to process his own emotions and his own despair. And so it seemed like his entire philosophy had kind of been built up on, in a like post hoc way, trying to justify his desire to suppress his own despair, saying just, if numbness is the only possible option for humanity, then I don't have to feel bad about being unable to process these emotions, because that's not the kind of thing that humans need to do. And so I feel like in terms of how human nature is challenged and then rectified, and the possibility of free will to redemption is made possible, I think Artorias and Arthur have to play a big part in that as well. Also, we can analyze this to death, and we are, and we have, and we will, but what a beautiful game. I mean, thank you, Namco. Thank you, Tales. Like Grail said, Grail didn't even think he liked this game. He found, the feelings in it in the end. I think it's a true testament to what they do that they're able to do that.
The end of chaos. It is the beginning. Mankind will go on fighting without end.
And notice in the context that I was talking about, this is Mythopoeia, that what Nautilus is saying now is kind of like the score, saying this is the way humanity will develop itself from here. This is the new spiritual order of the world with which they must engage, and against which they must develop themselves. Rokuro learned how to be Lloyd. I love that. He has a lot in common with Lorelei. And to your point that we talked about back at the end of Zestiria, Grail, I mean, that's a through line too, right? He's acting in this role of Motellus that has a lot to do with Lorelei. And then he's also absorbed and co-opted by Heldalf in the way Van does with Lorelei.
For every laugh, there will be tears.
Yeah, I feel like flashbacks used to be more common, Pottery. I feel like now, like more nowadays, even just in the last few years, it's stuff like what we got with Tales of Arise in terms of flash forwards. No one's ever going to leave Eleanor alone, Grail. We figured that out last time. Yeah, Pottery, I think in terms of like...
Embrace will be matched by love.
I don't want to talk too much over this. We can talk about it afterwards.
This world is cruel and unforgiving. Hey, come on. Even the gods themselves don't know what the future will bring.
The most perfect unlikely duo.
Nevertheless, I will always believe in them, Velvet. In humanity, both strong and weak. In humanity, both fearsome and kind. The day will finally come when your dream becomes reality. Until then, I will kindle a flame within me, burning strong and bright. And I will live.
Oh man, that was awesome. Yeah, so let's go through comments quickly. Yeah, that is interesting, Pottery, on the physical disfigurement. I feel like the only explanation we appear to have gotten about that is the little piece Mautellus said saying, you know, I've basically given people the opportunity to reset themselves according to what's within their hearts. And so perhaps the implication is that, you know, it really wasn't in Dial's nature for him to resonate more with being a lizard than being a man, whereas something like Rokuro's physical disfigurement and just his nature as a war demon and that bloodlust was essential to his character, which feels like maybe underspecified, but it does feel like it resonates to me at least. Yep, and yeah, good call, Grail. We're going to spend time working through the side content, so I'm sure we'll get more to think about and some more content to add a decent amount of context to this. Yeah, Pottery, what I was going to say, so yeah, interesting thought too about, who said it? Was it you, Grail, who said the idea of, Velvet and Laphicet just floating in the upper atmosphere? I think that's kind of interesting. I see it almost as like, since we're already talking to Tales of Vesperia on the stream, like an inverted Autophagos, where instead of it being this threat to humanity's continued existence that's out of sight, out of mind, it's the out of sight, out of mind, like initial conditions of the universe that make the perpetuation of humanity possible. So that feels like something that's nice and thematically resonant to me. It's interesting, Pottery, that question of yours, like what is the purpose to keeping Innominat alive? Because I think in terms of like Yeah, there you go. Asoga Peda. That actually sounds kind of better than you might imagine it would, just for reversing the word. I think in terms of the most direct explanation for what's happening in the world and the lore, I think it's right, as best I'm following it, that like the practical reason for keeping Innominat alive is that, you know, Laphicet is going to be Moutelis and create this balance to the world. And so as the kind of master lord of the land who extends his blessing, and also as a part of Innominat, like he needs that antithesis in order to survive, because if Innominat were destroyed, he and Velvet would be destroyed. That's clearly explained. But also I feel like there's this interesting thread, and this is where I want to kind of pick it apart in terms of the mythopoeia, and we can continue to think about this, because like there's a sense in a lot of cosmologies of the world that, you know, in order to have the concept of creation, you also have to have the concept of nothingness or void. You know, even just in the context of this game and the notion of malevolence, right? You need the balance of like free will and the capacity for sin in order for there to be the capacity for redemption. And one of the things that I also talk about in my work on Tales of the Abyss, which was one of the hardest things for me to wrap my head around just in terms of thinking about Kabbalah, forget about Tales of the Abyss, is this idea that in certain mystic like perspectives on the world, like Kabbalah, there's the idea that the nature of divinity is such that in order for it to be completely realized in all of its facets, it needs to manifest in all of the dimensions of the created world. But then because it manifests in these different incomplete aspects, it then ends up kind of overflowing and shattering and becoming something that is in one way or another less than ideal. And that's where this idea of the need for rectification or redemption comes from. The idea of redeeming humanity isn't just, you know, for the sake of people improving themselves. It's because of the role that individual people in the created world and their free will actually plays in rectifying the entire nature of the universe. No, not rectifying the nature of you, PlayStation. Jesus fucking Christ. No, I'm talking about the universe. I'm not talking about PlayStation. And so in that sense, I think it would be really interesting to go back to like some of the stuff that Grimoire said about Innominat and some of the connections that the party draws, and even stuff like Melchior's scheme and why Artorias was bringing about in the first place, because especially in terms of this idea of like consumption and despair grounding the world, I feel like there is something fairly like mystic about the idea that in order for the cosmos to have this new order that allows people to thrive and redeem themselves based on the possibility of malevolence, the world needs to be grounded in something more than just the blessing of this beneficent god Moutelis, because in order for him to exist, he has to be counterbalanced by this kind of irrational, despair-driven mutual consumption, but a consumption that, in terms of the self-contradiction that is also a big part of the third act, is mutually made possible by the love that Velvet and Laphicet share, and also the despair that Laphicet and Velvet have experienced, right? So that's less of like the literal lore explanation in terms of why is it that Innominat needs to be kept around. That explanation seems to just be, well, Laphicet is a part of Innominat. If Innominat dies, Laphicet dies. But in terms of what the meaning of that is for the universe, I can see how we could put all the pieces together in terms of like the spiritual potential of man only being possible by virtue of being grounded in terms of that sort of, not godhead, but like the overall ordering of the relationship between the four Empyreans, who alone would drive the world into chaos, and this kind of irrational, like sailor's monkey fist at the middle of them, Velvet and Innominat, and then that making possible the kind of blessing of free will and self-determination that Moutelis extends to everyone. So not surprising for a game that is, I would say, pretty clearly inspired by, myths in the Kojiki, the myth of Orochi and Amaterasu and everything, to have that kind of layer to it. But yeah, something I didn't think about at all my first time playing the game. So one more reason that Tales of the Abyss rears its head, as it usually does in these streams, as we know. Yeah, I do like it, and I feel like I think we'll have to think also about as we work through the additional content. We'll have plenty of time to come back to this, but also, like we talked about throughout this, it's interesting to think about this game on its own terms, and then also what it's saying in relation to Zestiria, because like we've been talking about through the last few streams, seems like Velvet and her party at the end of the day echo a lot of the sentiments that Sorey and his party do. But I feel like in terms of what we're talking about now and what the conclusion foregrounds, it really seems like the games are, it's not like they're redundant. I think they're saying the same thing, but on different levels, where we might think of Tales of Berseria as the cool kind of prequel that basically like explains and motivates the foundations for the world that make possible the journey that Sorey is on, right? Because we talked back in Tales of Zestiria about how Sorey is this interesting kind of protagonist where his beliefs and his convictions are pretty fully formed when he sets out into the world in a way that I think is unusual even amongst Tales protagonists. And it's more of a question of how he wants to enact those beliefs in the world because he doesn't really understand the world. He's never been outside Elysia at the start of that game. And so then for that kind of character with such conviction to be possible, I think it raises a pretty natural and interesting question of what did the world have to be like in order for someone like Sorey to come into being at all, and something that is born out of much more conflict and chaos of a kind of almost primordial nature, like what we see especially in the conclusive motions of Berseria. I think to me feels really natural and like a satisfying way to expand a world with a prequel without simply reiterating what the original game was saying or saying something that is totally juxtaposed against the original game and pushing the ideas of the story in different directions, like I would say we got in Dawn of the New World, contraposed with Tales of Symphonia. So many different models. I know the desolation too. I mean, I think that's even that, like we talked about the journey through the world and what that looked like and the act of sailing on the desolation versus the giant landmass of Tales of Zestiria. I feel like that kind of ties in with what we're saying too, right? The idea that back in these before times, it really was just sort of a more chaotic bouncing back and forth between these different communities that didn't have a lot to do with each other and were more isolated and therefore not able to coalesce in the way that is required of a kind of singular entity that can extend his blessing to all individuals in the way that Mautellus does, as opposed to someone who merely extends hegemonic and authoritarian rule that turns everyone into a single unit, like Artorias and Innominat did. And so to be able to sail across that much more diffuse world in order to make possible the much more unified world, even though, yes, understood it takes place in different continents, some different locations, but just in terms of the nature of the world that Sorey encounters and that constitutes his quest versus what Velvet and her group goes through, feels different in a way that resonates with these other themes that we're talking about. Man Alive. To make sure, I think I covered all the comments that we were chatting about. Oh, yes. Fun musings about Tales of Zestiria too, Grail. And honestly, I mean, these games aren't that old. We have seen in the Symphonia model that they do trilogies sometimes, the Tales games. And I'll tell you, I mean, I did really like Berseria the first time I played it. I don't feel like I appreciated it at the time because Zestiria wasn't fresh. I really didn't get Zestiria the first time. And now, having played them both in this different context and worked through them with you, I really do feel like, I mean, I think they're saying some really interesting things in a way that is very differently expressed than the other Tales games that I have played. And hats off to the Tales team, because I think, you could say that at least about pretty much every world that they create, which is part of why we're doing Tales of Praxis. While they're definitely all cousins of one another, they really do express things on their own terms in ways that are worth studying as such, but then also putting in conversation with one another, which is exactly what we're doing. So all that to say, if they did decide to go back to this world with something like a Zestiria 2, before we did Tales of Praxis, I might have been rolling my eyes and grumbling. Now I'd be excited. I'd be a happy camper. Yeah, love the idea of thinking more about the Mavens. I hope, and we can talk about this next week, I hope there's lots of side content we can explore in terms of the Maven legacy, because I think that's tremendously interesting. Like we talked about, personified malevolence. I think that's a great idea to keep coming back to, Grail. I was very upfront in Zestiria about me thinking that malevolence is one of the most interesting aspects of like the concepts that guide the trajectory of the game's story. And I think that kind of fell to the wayside at the beginning of Berseria, but man alive, it came back in full force in the third act, not just with the individual characters, but in really, I think in some senses, maybe kind of a whole cosmology built around malevolence. Maybe that's part of what I'm driving at. Like, I think part of what's interesting about what Berseria makes possible in Zestiria's world is, on the one hand, yes, Sorey is clearly trying to rid the world of malevolence, but on the other hand, like, the redemption that he makes possible in humans requires malevolence as a prerequisite. I think that's part of what Berseria is trying to express. It's not that malevolence is some kind of shortcoming or failure, but it's a necessary condition for humanity to experience in order to then determine how it is that they want to authentically act in the world at all. That friction itself is kind of important. You'll see when I publish my my upcoming article on Destiny and Vesperia, one of the sections in the middle that I'm really wrestling with and I think is really interesting is just the different ways in which these games focus on and articulate personal quests that are only made possible through betrayal. Yeah, of course, betrayal is a major theme in many stories, but I think the Tales games use them in really interesting and productive ways. And you can almost think, on a certain level, I think, of malevolence as a kind of personal betrayal, because that's what it is, right? It's a conflict between what you really believe ought to be done and what it is that you actually do in the world. So you are kind of betraying yourself in that certain way, but only through coming into that conflict and then being shown kind of how you have erred. Is it possible for you to enact your will in a way that is not automatic, but rather thoughtful and reflective for what you take to be the right reasons? I think it's something like that I'm driving at. No, I could not imagine if Volron returned. I don't think that would be interesting. Here's what I think, and you know, it's Tales of Praxis, so we can talk about every Tales game except for the one we just finished. But I think the interesting way in which Volron will have returned will be in his daughter, and so with everyone having to grapple with his legacy. So I think there'll be plenty of ways for him to be there without him being there, but who knows? I would cry too, for sure. Yeah, and I'm with you too, Grail. I think in your spirit, and like I was grumbling about during the less story-oriented parts of this stream, I definitely didn't come around on the battle system all the way. I think in terms of all these themes we're talking about and the capacity for the characters to sort of resist suppression and determination by an external force and everything, like there are a lot of thematic and narrative apologies you can make for certain aspects of the battle system. Doesn't mean I'm ever going to love playing it. But I'm with you. Yeah. And I'm glad that we've been able to do that for each other on the stream, because I do feel this way. Not so much exactly what I felt with Dawn of the New World, because I was really much more bearish on Dawn of the New World going into it, and I feel like I really turned around on that. But in terms of the duology of Zestiria and Berseria, I really feel like I get and appreciate that in a way that I did not the first time around, which is really special to me. And, you know, especially, as we said, when the games were released so closely together, you can tell and just see how much thought they put into those connections. It really is, in some sense, like, it's important that they're separate games that tell their own stories, but I think there is a clear sense in which it's also one story told in two parts. And so it was nice to be able to play it like that and think it through in those successive chunks as we did. Well, Grail, we already argued about that, so I'll reiterate my previous comments, and then we can save the reality of it for when Beyond the Dawn actually drops. Well, friends, I guess I could have turned back to my my other screen for the post-game talk. I didn't really think about that. Apologies. But hey, I wanted to broadcast the congratulations on completing the game for as long as possible because we all went through that together and it was awesome and it was great. And in the words of the Happy Mask Salesman, it was truly a good happiness. Boy, in a game about emotion, I guess that takes on a certain different lens, doesn't it? We could and will keep talking about this for quite a while, and knowing us and speaking from experience for quite a while, even beyond our time with Tales of Berseria. But as we've been talking about on the stream, this is not the end. And these games are the sorts of things where I think to do justice to something of this magnitude with so many different characters and different threads coming together so symphonically over so many hours, you really do owe it to yourself and the game, whether it's this game or something you're playing on your own, to take the time to really sit with it, chew on it, talk about it with either with other people who have played the game or with people who haven't. Like, even though Dan's a gamer, he hasn't played this yet, and I've been pestering him with messages because he's a big Japanese myth scholar, saying, hey, this game is really leaning into stuff to do with the Kojiki and the myth of Orochi and Susano. I think it's really cool. I want to tell you about it. So I hope you have the opportunity, or force the opportunity, to have those conversations with people in your lives too. I think that's a big part of how it is that we come to refine our own views about games and think about why they're so special to us. I won't belabor the second impressions of finishing the Berseria replay, except to, again, thank Bandai Namco so much. I know this game has a lot of love, perhaps unlike Zestiria, but who knows? Maybe, to use Eisen's metaphor, they were trying to turn the ship around with this one. But either way, I have so much appreciation for it. I'm really glad we were able to talk through a lot of our first thoughts, not just about this, but also about its relationship with the other games, with Zestiria. We'll be chatting way more about it this coming week. I'm not going to make any promises about when we're going to start next game because I'm not sure how long the side content will take us. As any Tales fan will know, that's always a bit of a floating target and an open question, but philosophy is thinking in slow motion, and Tales of Praxis is gaming in slow motion. So we don't have any agenda. We're going to take all the time we need to. We'll start on Monday at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, to work through the side content. Grail, I know you've started a list of some side content, so hopefully you'll be able to be our spirit guide. I'll put some time in this weekend between writing sessions on this article to also try to put together a game plan. We've got a lot, and judging by the little bit that we've seen already, and even like the little bit we stumbled upon, like that little moment from Artorias' past, I think there's going to be a lot of really, really rewarding and interesting stuff to chew on that will probably have us revisiting a lot of the core aspects of the game in some new and cool ways. Yes, Pottery, you'll be back to Final Fantasy VII Remake. As you know, I will be happy to chat with you about that whenever you want to, on Tales of Praxis or otherwise. Chrissy, it was so great to see you again. Yes, welcome back. I hope you're able to tune into the next one. And don't be a stranger either way. I'm always around and happy to chat gaming with you. Yeah, right. That's the real lesson from this game, isn't it, Grail? That sometimes the main character is someone different than the one the game wants you to believe it is. And in this case, it was obviously Eleanor, and every man in the world fucking knew it. That's the real, most thematically salient note on which we can end. For those who are still on, and it seems like actually a decent number of people are, so cheers for hanging all the way through. I love spending time thinking through all of this. This is really the live book club aspect of it. So as much as you like to watch, if you want to lurk, that's great. If you're watching on YouTube, that's awesome. Really do love the voices of the real live gamers and JRPG party members in the chat. So don't be shy. Don't feel afraid to contribute. Any and all thoughts you have are welcome, and that's part of what makes this so special and truly feel like a real-life JRPG. If you want to exercise that kind of agency we keep extolling the virtues of, there is still an open poll for deciding or influencing or voicing your opinion on what you'd like us to turn to next after Berseria. We're going to spend a lot of time digesting and working through that side content this coming week. So think on what you'd like to do next. Think on your impressions of Berseria. I'll leave some time before we dive into the side content on Monday to just talk through impressions some more. But yes, this has been the longest playthrough yet. I think it was one where it warranted the time and rewarded it. But Tales games often do, don't they? If not always. So friends, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Grail is sending threats. I guess we know who the traitor in the party is in this real life JRPG party. But yes, thank you all. Grail, Pottery, Chrissy, so great seeing you all. Everyone else who's been hanging out, thank you. Pleasure to have you here. I hope you've enjoyed it. We see so much in our experiences in games, and truly engaging and working through them in a communal setting, like I was talking about earlier, the stream just adds a whole other robust dimension to it. So thank you for that. I really hope you think well and game well over this weekend, and I hope to see you back for all of that wonderful side content starting this Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Until then, my dear friends, it's been a pleasure. Don't be too rational. Take the advice of Velvet and Laphicet, now Mautellus, and think through your own humanity and agency by virtue of those self-contradictions. Till Monday, friends.